The scene opens on a calm sea. A man chilling on his yacht, casually watching the news. On screen, DM Financial's ex-CEO, Chairman Na. It's been a whole year since he ghosted everyone, taking a fat stack of cash from investments and loans from his backers. The victims, who lost everything from pocket change to entire fortunes, are screaming for a fast probe and Chairman Na's immediate arrest. Meanwhile, the cops are pushing hard for an urgent red notice from the international bigwigs. The man watching the news is, of course, Chairman Na Ilsu himself. He listens to the broadcast with a smug little smirk. He scoffs, thinking, what a bunch of clowns. He wonders what pathetic move they'll make next. In his head, he labels anyone he duped a total fool. As the ex-CEO of DM Financial, Chairman Na believes sharp guys like him are meant to take all the money. Then, the girl he kept around for fun brought him a glass of juice. With another arrogant smirk, he sips his juice. The scene cuts to that night. Na Ilsu is out cold, sleeping soundly, when a voice keeps calling his name, telling him to get up. He slowly cracks his eyes open and glances forward. A man's silhouette sits on a chair in the dark. The sight makes Chairman Ilsu's blood run cold. The figure in the chair finally speaks to Chairman Ilsu. He asks if it's fun blowing stolen cash while the middle class and poor are freaking out over their life savings. And he's on a world tour on his precious yacht. He asks if Ilsu feels any shame whatsoever. Hearing that, Chairman Ilsu, totally spooked, demands to know who he is. The man rises from the chair, a disappointed sigh in his voice, reminding the chairman he'd forgotten his voice so fast. Then, the man steps out of the shadows and into the light. Once his face is clear, Chairman Ilsu recognizes him in an instant. It's Director Kim Muyuk. The moment he sees him, Chairman Ilsu's terror spikes as he stammers. How did you get here? Director Kim Muyuk says he's here to collect the debt Ilsu owes Tazin Capital. At those words, Ilsu is filled with pure dread and sputters that he has no idea what Director Kim is talking about, claiming total ignorance. Then he shouts. Chairman Ilsu screams for his bodyguards, only to see them all knocked out cold on the floor. Smirking, Director Kim Muyuk tells him to chill out, saying they aren't here to drag him back to Korea. They just came to collect what's theirs. Then, Kim Muyuk shows Chairman Na Ilsu the bill for exactly how much he lifted. He explains that with principal and the annual interest, the total is 320 billion and 20 million won. The total amount Ilsu needs to cough up is 470 billion and 20 million won. Seeing this, Ilsu's jaw drops, screaming, 470 billion won. Kim Muyuk just keeps going. And based on the current exchange rate, that's about $358 million. So you can just deposit 350 million. Panicked, Chairman Ilsu yells he has no money left, claiming he blew it all on the yacht and is now left with absolutely nothing. He protested furiously, saying it's absurd for 1 year's interest to be double the principal amount. He called them crooks, taunting them to just take the yacht. Chairman Ilsu insisted that was absolutely out of the question. Director Kim Muyuk calmly warned that if he became food for the sharks now, he wouldn't get a single thing back. But Chairman Ilsu shrieked in desperation, yelling he'd rather die than live without his money. He'd deposit the principal of 150 billion won, begging them to just forget the interest. He argued that with the interest he'd already paid, they'd still profit, even if they only took back the principal amount. He whined that all the other investors were giving up their money anyway. Director Kim Muyuk ignored the chairman. Instead, he told his man Sanangi to toss Chairman Ilsu right back into the sea. Hearing this, Chairman Ilsu shrieked and cried out, begging them to wait. He warned them that if he died, they'd never be able to find the cash. Director Kim Muyuk smirked, explaining that even if they couldn't find the money, someone who embezzled Tazin Capital's funds had to be made an example of, so others would learn the consequences. Then, Director Kim Muyuk ordered his men to hurry up and toss Chairman Ilsu back into the water. This time, they'd sink him even deeper. His men shoved the chairman back into the sea as he shouted desperately, pleading for Kim Muyuk to wait, promising he'd do anything. At that, Director Kim Muyuk had the chairman hauled back up. Chairman Ilsu swiftly sent the $350 million. Seeing this, Kim Muyuk flashed a charming grin and confirmed the $350 million was deposited without a hitch. Director Kim Muyuk and his crew then thanked Chairman Ilsu for using Tazin Capital. Furious, red with rage, Chairman Ilsu cursed them out, yelling he'd worked like a dog for that money, just for them to strip him of everything. Director Kim Muyuk just smiled, telling him to call again if he ever needed help. Then they sailed off on their sinking boat. Not long after, police arrived in their own sinking boats, surrounding Chairman Ilsu from every side. They announced they were the Filipino Coast Guard, and that he was on an Interpol red notice. Requested by the Korean police, they warned him not to move, threatening to open fire if he resisted. As he watched it all unfold, Chairman Ilsu thought about the torment he was suffering all because of those bastards. After finishing his job, Kim Muyuk went to the house of Cheon Sumin, chairman of Tazin Capital. There, Chairman Cheon Sumin, Vice Chairman Cheon Suhen, and Sumin's eldest son, Shin Hwan, were all drinking together. Chairman Cheon Sumin praised Muyuk for his work, saying he'd done an excellent job. In response, Director Kim Muyuk humbly replied he'd only followed their orders and the company's policies. Chairman Cheon Sumin noted Muyuk's efforts in hunting down the man fleeing across the world on a yacht and recovering the loan's interest. Appreciating his fine work, Vice Chairman Cheon Suhan enthusiastically agreed, crediting Muyuk for saving the company from a huge loss. Noting that 470 billion won is no small sum, Chairman Cheon Sumin declared Kim Muyuk was the only one they could trust now, praising him again. Hearing all this praise, Chin Juan looked less than thrilled. Playing humble, Director Kim Muyuk said he was merely doing his job. Chairman Cheon's then insisted he use uncle in private, stressing that they were all family there. Vice Chairman Cheon Suhen chimed in, calling Muyuk the only son of his beloved, departed sister, Cheon Mijin. Chairman Cheon Sumin drove it home, telling Muyuk that everyone present carried the blood of Chi and Tyan, that made them family. Listening, Director Kim Muyuk's gaze hit a photo of his grandfather as his thoughts turned inward. His mind went to his maternal grandfather, the legend of Myeongdong's loan shark scene, Chien Tyan. Back then, even the richest elites had to bow to borrow from him. He was the notorious ruler of South Korea's loan shark empire, the loan shark king himself. His known fortune: cash, shares, stocks, to real estate, foreign funds, a hoard worth trillions of won. And yet, Kim Muyuk thought, not a single one was left to him, his own maternal grandson. The fortune went to Chien Tyan's real children, the brothers Cheon Sumin and Cheon Suin, and then was passed on to their own kids. Turning on his son, Chairman Cheon Sumin grilled Cheon Jiwon for skipping work while Muyuk was busting his butt. He demanded to know if Jiwon had found CEO Yoon, the rat who ran off with the apartment construction money. Cheon Jiwon casually replied, saying he thought he would find him pretty soon. That answer made Chairman Cheon Sumin explode, screaming at Jiwon for always needing more time. He brought up the last screw-up, when he was too messed up to do the job. Watching the scene, Director Kim Muyuk silently sized up Cheon's Jiwon, the Cheon's eldest son, a useless, greedy junkie who was coasting on his family's name. As far as he could see, Chairman Cheon's kept laying into Jiwon, calling him pathetic and a total embarrassment in front of Muyuk. Then he faced Kim Muyuk, praising his hard work and telling him to rest. Muyuk politely accepted the offer, thanking his uncle before he left the house. The second he was gone, the atmosphere inside instantly brightened. The family resumed their party, their laughter now louder and more carefree. As he was driving away, Kim Muyuk's thoughts drifted back 30 years. He recalled trying so damn hard to be accepted as part of the family, taking on every dirty job and obeying every order. But after all that, he still wasn't a real member of the Cheon's family. As he drove, a reminder flashed on his phone. His grandmother's ancestral memorial was scheduled for that day. He thought of his grandmother, the only real family he had left after his parents were gone. His grandmother had passed away 30 years ago. On this very day, Director Kim Muyuk was grabbing items for his grandmother's memorial rite when a call came in from Park Sanji. Park Sanji reported he'd found CEO Yoon of Jingjeon Construction in Incheon, and the chairman ordered to grab him immediately. Kim Muyuk noted this was supposed to be Ji Won-hyung's job, but Park Sanji said the chairman told Kim Muyuk to handle it personally, confirming the chairman's direct command. Kim Muyuk agreed to move out right away. No hesitation, Kim Muyuk rolled up to the park. Park Sani mentioned. He called, asking where Sanangi and the crew were. Since no one was in sight, just then, the whole squad popped out, armed and circling Kim Muyuk with a seriously weird vibe. They sneered, saying the chief had finally graced them. Seeing this unfold, Kim Muyuk's fuse blew. He demanded what the hell they were playing at and where Park Sanangi was. Just then, Park Sanangi himself appeared, smirking, with a lazy apology for the late-night call. Enraged, Kim Muyuk roared at the guy, yelling what kind of game he was playing. A car suddenly gunned it for Kim Muyuk, but he dodged with a lightning-fast leap. Right after, the whole mob swarmed him. Even outnumbered, Kim Muyuk unleashed a furious counterattack, but a thug landed a crushing blow, slamming him to the ground. He glared up at Park Sanangi, spitting out a curse of betrayal, asking how he could do this. Mercilessly. Another goon smashed Kim Muyuk hard on the head, knocking him out cold. Later, Kim Muyuk woke up to find himself bound inside his own damn car. The chilling realization hit they were about to shove his car right into the ocean. He screamed desperately at Park Sanji, demanding his plan and pleading to be let go. Park Sanji coldly said his hands were tied. Orders were to retire Chief Kim Muyuk. Kim Muyuk, boiling with rage, demanded to know who gave the order. Was it Chairman Chian's, Xian Suhin, or Hyun Hwan? He screamed for the truth. But Park Sani just waved it off, saying the who didn't matter. He told Kim Muyuk they were just dogs on a leash, following orders. And with that, he bid him farewell. The goons began shoving the car toward the sea. Kimuja kept roaring, pleading for them to stop. But they ignored his pleas, sending the car into the sea. As it sank, Kim Muyuk's mind flooded with bitterness. Was this really how it ends? Dying like this, after his loyal service to the Cheon family? His life ending so meaninglessly after being used like a dog. Unbelievable. He thought of his grandma, his heart aching, recalling his promise for her memorial. Well, looks like he was on his way to see her now. Dawn broke on a seashore, where a boy lay passed out. It was none other than Kim Muyuk. But he looked way younger. As he slowly came to, he wondered, am I alive? Then suddenly, some kid ran over and kicked him. More punks were nearby. But Kim Muyuk, FDE strength, surging back, started to absolutely wreck them all. Kim Muyuk had no clue why everyone was jumping him and throwing punches. All of a sudden, another punk charged, yelling curses, and swung at him. But Muyuk landed a solid punch, dropping the kid flat, shocked by his power. Muyuk thought, my body. It feels so light, like I'm a kid again. Two more punks rushed him, but Muyuk swiftly kicked them down. Seeing this, the rest of the crew got furious and mobbed Muyuk at once. However, Muyuk fought them all off with ease, totally demolishing every one. After, he shot a terrifying death glare at the last two punks and warned them to scram. Spooked by his killer glare, the two punks scrambled off with their crew. Wiped out. Kim Muyuk collapsed. That's when some other dude started yelling at the runners, trash-talking and daring him to come back for a real throwdown anytime. Turning to Muyuk, the guy casually said he'd come looking to pick up some chicks, but all he found were dudes. Noticing Muyuk sweating, he jokingly offered a smoke. Watching his carefree attitude, Muyuk couldn't believe it. Was this dude really in high school? Then he saw the name tag on the kid's uniform. It was Lee Mongu, his best bud from middle school. Another pal slapped Muyuk's shoulder and praised him, saying just as he'd thought. Muyuk was the top dog brawler and wrecked that whole crew alone. Muyuk knew that face. It was Park Kong, another of his middle school buddies. He remembered Hanung's old man was a cop, so they could mess around without sweating it too much. Confused, Muyuk asked his buddies where they were at. Mongu, thrown by the question, asked if Muyuk was okay or if he'd totally lost his marbles. Hansen chimed in, saying they were in Guangali. Muyuk's confusion just deepened, seeing his baffled look. Mongu asked what was up, wondering why Muyuk was suddenly using that Sioux dialect and asking weird stuff. He even asked if Muyuk took a hard knock to the head before grabbing Muyuk's noggin. Mongu checked it out, saying it seemed fine and joked it was hard as a rock. Muyuk then hit him with the year and date. Mongu, baffled but worried, said it was September 21st, 1990, and asked again if Muyuk was hurt. Muyuk's brain went into overdrive, processing the date. He vividly recalled dying, falling into the ocean, but somehow, he'd time-traveled 30 years into the past. Hansen, clueless to Muyuk's crisis, just casually said he was starving. Mongu was down for it and said, let's go grab some ramen. His treat. But Muyuk's mind was still stuck on that date. It hit him the importance of this day. He thought, I gotta get home. Now, without saying anything. He just bolted. His friends yelled after him, totally confused where he was off to. But he didn't answer and just kept booking it. While running, Muyuk's mind flashed to that day. The day his grandma, his only family, had passed on. He recalled it was a heart attack. They said if someone had just found her a bit sooner and called for help, she could have made it. His head spinning with thoughts, Muyuk finally reached his house, his chest tight with emotion, stepping through the familiar door. His grandma sees his early return and, her gentle voice full of worry, asks why he's back from school already and if something bad happened to him. The second he lays eyes on her, a tidal wave of emotion just completely slams into him. Seeing his precious grandma after 30 long years awakens memories he'd buried deep inside his heart. Overwhelmed, tears just start pouring down his face, blurring everything as he tries to pull it together. Seeing him breathless with tear-streaked cheeks, his grandma gets more and more worried. She asks why he's so winded and wonders if he sprinted home because he was starving. Seeing him bawling his eyes out like this, she anxiously asks if something awful has happened. Unable to contain the tempest of emotions, Muyuk desperately throws his arms around his grandmother in a tight hug, his body shaking as he completely breaks down. Through choked sobs, he desperately tries to explain, but the only words that can escape are, "It's nothing." He just missed her so deeply. With every single fiber of his being, his grandmother, both touched and bewildered by his sudden affection, responds with gentle amusement in her voice. She says that seeing him cry like this makes it feel like he's turned back into that innocent child from long ago. With warmth in her eyes, she recalls how beautiful he always was, whether he was smiling or he was crying, and marvels at how much he's grown up over the years. Wiping his tears away with trembling hands, Muyuk tightly grasps his grandmother's frail hand. As urgency fills his voice, he pleads with her, telling her that this is absolutely not the time for sentiment. They have to get to the hospital. Right now. Startled by his sudden intensity, his grandmother asks in confusion why they'd need to go to the hospital. With desperation, making his words sharp, Muyuk explains that she could collapse at any moment and urges her to have a complete medical checkup without delay. His grandmother, still unaware of the situation's gravity, tries to softly reassure him, insisting that she isn't sick and there's no cause for any concern. But Muyuk, failing to hide his terror, raises his voice, yelling that she has to hurry up, that her very life could be on the line. Even so, his grandmother just smiles gently, with all the wisdom of her age, reassuring him once more. She tells him not to worry, as she has no plan to die before seeing him get married and helping raise his children. In a cheerful tone, she tells him to go to his room and wait a bit while she goes to prepare a meal for him. Afterward, his grandmother lovingly prepares an array of delicious dishes for Muyuk and gently urges him to eat slowly. She worries there aren't many side dishes today. Muyuk reassures her, saying everything he likes is here and he promises to enjoy it. Hungrily, Muyuk starts to eat as if he hasn't seen food in days. Watching him inhale the meal, his grandmother expresses her concern, joking that people might think he hasn't eaten for years. She tells him to wait. She also made his favorite corn juice. But as she walks away, Muyuk suddenly finds himself overwhelmed with emotion, bursting into tears once more. He thinks about how, after 30 long years, he can finally eat a simple meal made by his grandmother's own hands. He reflects on it bitterly, questioning why he worked tirelessly like a dog for Tazin Capital and the Qian family when all he ever really needed was this simple, heartfelt meal. A moment later, as his grandma goes to get the juice, Muyuk hears the sudden, sharp sound of something falling. Alarmed, he bolts toward the noise, only to be horrified as he sees his grandmother collapsed on the floor. Unconscious, absolute fear grips him. The scene cuts to a frantic Muyuk, rushing his grandmother to the emergency room. She's unconscious on a hospital bed. As a panicked Muyuk speaks anxiously with the doctor explains that, if he had arrived just a little later, things would have been far worse. More tests are needed. But it already seems that surgery will be necessary. If this is left untreated, his grandmother could collapse again at any time. Muyuk's mind reeled. Just a bit ago, he almost had hundreds of billions. Now, he checks his pockets and finds a measly 151. Just then, Mongu shows up, covering Grandma Muyuk's hospital bill, saying his dad just gave him his allowance this morning. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Muyuk thanks him, vowing to pay him back as soon as possible. In his mind, he recalled, Muyuk knew Mongu's dad owned that huge nightlife business on Nodong's main street. Mongu just brushed off the offer of repayment, telling Muyuk not to sweat the small stuff, since it's for his grandma's hospital stay. He reminded Muyuk of the countless awesome meals his grandma had prepared for them all. Hyung chimed in too, telling Muyuk to just focus on taking care of his grandma and promising they'd visit her often. Concerned, Mongu asked if his grandma would truly be okay, inquiring about the necessary treatments and meds. Muyuk, his mind heavy, remembered the doctor's grim words. She absolutely needed surgery. Without it, his grandma could collapse at any time, and the surgery would cost about 10 million won. Muyuk thought bitterly how 10 million won seemed like nothing before he died. Now, all he had left were a few small coins in his hand. He then realized there was only one path forward to save his grandmother and guarantee she got the surgery. With new resolve, He hit a phone booth and called someone over in Pyeongchang. He gave his name as Kim Muyuk and asked that a message be relayed to Chairman Cheon Tasin. He announced he was the son of the chairman's only daughter, Chin Mi-suk, and that he wanted to meet his grandfather. Muyuk stood atop the roof of Danban Hospital, the same place where his grandmother was now staying. He looked out over the city, lost in thought. It was 1990, when high-rises were still rare. The city view was so simple, almost nostalgic. He thought to himself, this is precisely how he remembered Busan from back then. It was so surreal. He was really back in 1990. But a dark question haunted him. Will I be killed again, 30 years from now? His suspicion fell instantly upon his uncle, Chairman Cheon Suman. Out of all people, he was the most likely suspect. Only he could have commanded Muyuk's own subordinates to turn their backs on him, but the motive made no sense. Back then, Muyuk was still a valuable asset to his uncle, so why would Suman kill him? Doubt crept in. Was it someone else? Maybe Chi sought him? Or even Chi and John? The uncertainty gnawed at him. Who was it? Who was really behind his murder? But through the confusion, one thing was crystal clear. This was his second chance. His shot to crush the Kian family and take over Tazin Capital. As he stood there, lost in his own thoughts, a voice suddenly called from behind. Someone yelled, telling him to listen up. Muyuk turned, seeing a weird-looking guy talking right to him. The man gestured for him to come closer, saying he just wanted a quick word. Inside, Muyuk wondered who this guy was. The man then asked for his name. Suspicious. Muyuk shot back, asking why he needed to know. Why did this guy care about his name? A wary thought surfaced in his mind. Is this guy a goon? One of the thugs glared at Kim Muyuk, totally irritated, wondering what his problem was and why he was posturing. The guy next to him just snorted, saying he was totally losing it. The weirdo in charge scoffed, pointing out Kim Muyuk's disrespect for his elders. But Kim remained cool and collected. Kim Muyuk replied that proper etiquette is to give your name before asking for another's. The strange man just laughed it off, bellowing that he was Park Dong-gu, saying the name like it was a big deal, and asked if Kim had heard the name before. Inside his head, Kim Muyuk knew the name. Park Dong-gu, the number 2 of the infamous Sasan gang, the crew that ran the Jung district of Busan. The guy had made a name for himself, shot up the ranks in just 5 years, and was seen as the gang's next heir. But, in 1990, during the so-called war on crime, Park Dong-gu got framed for his boss's dirty work. While on the run, he was found brutally offed in a motel at just 29. Park Dong-gu, intrigued, pressed if Kim Muyuk seriously didn't know who he was. Unfazed, Kim Muyuk casually shot back like he had no clue, even asking if Park owned a comic shop. Park, annoyed for a sec. Park Dong-gu reined it in, pointing out he'd already given his name. He was expecting Kim to do the same. Kim Muyuk just replied with his name. Park Dong-gu repeated it, playfully messing with it, calling him Kim Mu, Kimumu, and joked it was a killer name. Hearing this lame joke, Kimuya started getting annoyed, thinking to himself how childish this guy was. Park then asked if he was the rumored good kid from room 405. Confused, Kimuya asked what he was talking about. Park Dong-soo said the whole hospital was buzzing with tales about Kim, how he looked after his grandma, handling everything for her. Kim Muyuk replied that she was his only family left, so of course he'd do it. Park Dong-gu agreed it was natural, then suddenly changed the whole subject, asking if Kim was still a student, eyeing his uniform and guessing if he went to Dongan Vocational High. Kim said yeah, and shot back, asking if Park Dong-gu was a gangster. Park Dong-soo played dumb, asking why Kim would ever think that. Kim shot back that Park's state looked like someone had shivved him and left him here. That really ticked Park Dong-gu off, who snapped that real men get poked once or twice. He claimed it was normal, that a kid like Kim wouldn't get it since grown-ups have their own wars. Park then wondered how Kim could be so calm, not even a little scared in front of him. Kim, totally unfazed, asked, should I be scared? Frustrated, Park just called Kim a punk, pissed that he always had to have the last word. Kim Muyuk then took a step closer, still totally composed, and asked if he could bounce now that they seemed done talking. Park Dong-gu, finally caving, let him go. But before Kim left, Park yelled out mockingly, twisting his name to Kangmu, telling him to care for his grandma and that they'd meet again. Hearing that, Kim Muyuk felt a new surge of annoyance. Park just changed his name like it was nothing. Walking down the stairs, Kim's mind was on Park Dong-soo of the Sasan gang. At this time, the crew wasn't a national powerhouse yet. Still, it wasn't a small fry. Kim figured one day Park Dong-gu might actually be a useful pawn. Kim Muyuk entered his grandma's cabin. Spotting a strange man talking to her, his grandma turned, introducing the man, saying a visitor was here for him. As the guy faced Muyuk, he knew him instantly. Asterisk. So, it's Director H. Asterisk. They stepped outside to talk, heading to a nearby coffee shop. There, the man introduced himself as Hmong Hun, a subordinate of Chairman Cheon Tien. Muyuk knew of him. Remembering Hong Hun was his grandpa's most trusted right-hand man, the one man the chairman trusted, till his final breath. In his past life, Hyung Hun revealed his maternal grandpa's existence, Cheon Tien, at his grandma's funeral. Hmong Hun told Muyuk he was to accompany him to Sue, unfazed. Muyuk asked why the chairman didn't come himself, stunned by his composure. Hyung Hun thought, asterisk, how can a kid have this much nerve times? He could tell this kid, Muyuk, wasn't just faking it. Hmong Hun said the chairman was busy and lacked time to see him. But Muyuk clarified, asterisk, I'm not asking for a meeting. He was talking about his mother, Kim Muyuk. Deep down, Muyuk knew the old man would never show his face. He knew the chairman would scoff at being summoned. So he pushed the issue even further, pointing out how the chairman never even visited his own daughter's grave. If the old man really wants to meet him, he'd have to go there first. Hearing this, Hmong Hun was struck silent. Lost for words, Muyuk recalled his past life. A time he had to obey them like a dog. Just an orphan. He'd taken Hmong Hun's offer to pay for the funeral. He was ordered to Sue right after the funeral to meet the man, chairman, who promised to ensure his survival if he just obeyed. Back then, without his grandpa's help, he would have been forced to quit school. But this time, it's different. He knows the truth now. With a firm resolve, Muyuk told Hmong Hun to deliver his ultimatum. If the chairman wants to meet, he comes himself. Muyuk then stood up, wished the director a safe trip, then left. Hyung Hun watched him go, a deep unease washing over him. Asterisk. What is this overwhelming pressure times? He realized the reports calling Muyuk a mere troublemaker were dead wrong. He saw something else entirely. The only son of Chairman Cheon Tien's daughter, Kim Muyuk, was no ordinary kid. Back at the hospital, Muyuk told his grandma everything. She was totally shocked. She asked if the chairman really summoned him to Seoul. Muyuk confirmed, adding, he told the director the chairman must visit his mother first. It's insane. She died 17 years ago, and he never once visited her grave. His grandma hesitantly asked if he really knew what kind of man his mother's father was. Muyuk said, he knew. The guy runs his empire in Sue. He then admitted to calling the number she'd hidden, the very one she used to call the chairman's men. Stunned, his grandmother started to object, saying he had to respect his grandfather. But Muyuk, defiant, shot back. Asterisk. And why should I? After all, that man ignored them for 17 years. Grandma insisted he couldn't be like this. But Muya just pulled her into a soft embrace. He told her to forget everything else and just focus on her health. As long as she was with him, he needed no one. He swore to himself, this time, he'd make her happy. In his past life, she was just gone, without a single warning, but not this time. Meanwhile, in Sue, Chairman Cheon Tazin was grilling Human Huna. He relayed Muyuk's audacious message. If the chairman wants to see him, he'll have to come himself. Helman confirmed it all. He explained Muyuk would meet him, but only at his mother's calarium. The chairman just smirked at the sheer nerve of it all. Was this kid fearless or just a fool? No matter. His interest was piqued. He'd go to Busan himself to see. He was dying to see what kind of punk Muyuk was. If he was useful, he'd be worked to the bone for the good of the family. The scene shifts. Kim Muyuk steps onto the familiar territory of his high school. Worn-out hallways. The buzz of students in the air. This place was once his battlefield. But now, it feels kinda nostalgic. He walks into class and is instantly hit by the worried stare of his classmate. Real concern laced Mangu's voice as he asked about Muyuk's grandma. His brow furrowed in genuine worry, with a slight nod and a hint of relief. Muyuk replies, showing his quiet thanks. His grandmother was finally discharged from the hospital, and for now, she's okay. A flicker of warmth bloomed in him. Someone actually cared enough to ask, trying to lighten the mood. Mangu cracks a huge grin and suggests they ditch class for the day. He jokingly suggests hitting the pool hall instead. His attempt to cheer Muyuk up felt totally natural. Like old times, but when Muyuk reaches into his bag and pulls out a textbook, he freezes. His fingers brush the pages as a bizarre thought hits him. It's so surreal. Being back in high school after 30 long years. The weight of this second chance is seriously pressing down on him, but he steels himself. He shakes off the thought and gives a firm answer. He suggests they just focus on class. His voice held a surprising resolve. A wave of pure shock washes over the entire classroom, eyes wide, jaws on the floor. This wasn't the Muyuk they knew. Mangu, completely floored, grabs Muyuk in a dramatic hug, stammering out a joke about the world surely coming to an end. He just can't process his friend's sudden seriousness. To Mangu and the others, this was like watching an actual miracle unfold. Muyuk is confused for a sec. Then it hits him. He remembers his younger self. A punk who couldn't care less about hitting the books. Until his grandfather's brutal demands forced his hand. The memories bubble up. A stern face, his grandfather's cold words scorning his awful grades. Setting a crazy goal, Korea University Law School. Back then, it felt like some kind of sick joke. His grandfather's voice echoes, laying down the ultimatum that forged his future, fueled by desperation and a thirst for approval. Muyuk had once buried his head in books. He clawed his way into law school just to get a spot under his grandfather's roof. But that victory came at a steep price. He was basically a servant, shackled by blood to the Chin family. And yet now, with this textbook in his hands, he swears this time. It's personal. He'll hit the books for his own damn future. Not for anyone else. Just outside the classroom, some punks are just loafing around, shooting the breeze. Their chill vibe shatters when an angry teacher storms down the hall, roaring for them to get to class. Spooked, they scramble for their seats just as the teacher explodes into the room. The whole class hastily stands to bow. But the teacher's death glare immediately locks onto Muyuk. Pure rage twists his face as he marches over, his hand rising to Muyuk's forehead with a practiced, violent ease. His sharp words fly, chastising Muyuk for having been absent from school for so long, as if accusing him of treating his education like some kind of game. Muyuk replies calmly, explaining he was caring for his sick grandmother, but that just makes him angrier. The teacher's rage explodes. Without a second thought, he slaps Muyuk hard across the face. The sound cracks through the silent room, grabbing everyone's attention. Sneering, the teacher accuses Muyuk of lying, refusing to believe a notorious troublemaker could actually be so responsible. His assumptions completely blind him to the truth. The sting of the blow sparks a memory in Muyuk's mind. He remembers this exact teacher from his first year, a guy infamous for his cruelty. He earned his nickname from moments like this. Muyuk's unflinching stare just pisses the teacher off more. So he strikes again, screaming for Muyuk to sit. But Muyuk stands firm, his mind flashing back. He remembers the real reason for this teacher's grudge, the bribe his grandma refused to pay. All because Muyuk stopped her. Ever since then, the teacher had seized every chance to lash out at him. Another hard slap hits Muyuk's cheek. But he won't flinch. His composure only seems to provoke the teacher more, who explodes, accusing him of being nothing but a future gangster, hoisting a wooden stick. The teacher winds up for a brutal strike. But before it can land, the classroom door is thrown open abruptly. The vice principal appears, slightly out of breath, cutting the tense air, trying to maintain his authority. The teacher demands to know why he's being interrupted. The vice principal, still catching his breath, asks where he can find Kim Muyuk. The words make the teacher's expression stiffen in shock. Outside the school building, the scene shifts. A luxury car glides to a stop, turning every single student's head. Wang Hun gets out, his aura demanding respect, and calls for Muyuk to get in the car. The sight of the fancy car sends shockwaves through the crowd. They just stare in total disbelief, unable to connect the image of their classmate with such insane wealth. As Muyuk slides into the passenger seat, his eyes fix on the man beside him. A spark of recognition hits him. Kian Taizan, his legendary grandfather. He remembers their last meeting, the day before Qian Taizan's death 20 years ago. The old man examines Muyuk with a piercing gaze, his voice solid as he confirms it's Muyuk. Muyuk answers back without missing a beat, stating who his parents were with a quiet power. Qian Taizan gives a slow nod, accepting the truth. He reveals that he visited Muyuk's mother's grave, though Muyuk can't help but point out coldly that his grandfather never once visited until now. His tone carries a mix of resentment and duty as he mentions his sick grandma, making it clear he won't apologize for his priorities. Shinta-sen studies his grandson, startled by the young man's unwavering defiance. He notes the lack of fear in Muyuk's eyes, a strange sight for a man used to commanding absolute respect, a hint of curiosity in Tazin's voice. He asks if Muyuk knows who he is. In his head, Muyuk replays his grandfather's infamous legacy, a legendary loan shark king, a man who built an empire from nothing, rising from a mere laborer to a figure feared in both political and financial circles. Out loud, he downplays what he knows, saying only that he's heard his grandfather runs a business. Kieson chuckles at the understatement, calling his work a small lending business in Su. He then cuts right to the heart of the matter, asking point-blank why Muyuk wanted to meet him. A faint, knowing smile plays on Muyuk's lips. In his head, he admits the truth to himself. There is just one thing he seeks from his grandfather. If he's going to challenge the Qian family's might, there is one essential weapon: he must secure money. The immense wealth awaiting Qianzan's heirs after his death was a temptation too hard to resist. Muyuk had already made up his mind. He had to seize all of that money for himself. To do that, he had to secretly gather funds to build his power and fight against them, all without the Qian family ever finding out. When Kim Muyuk finally stands before his grandfather, the old man asks him directly about the reason for this meeting and what he wants from him. Muyuk doesn't hesitate for a second. He simply asks for financial help. Hearing this, his grandfather scoffs internally, thinking that in the end, it all just came down to money. To him, Mew seemed like nothing more than a pathetic kid. Still, he asks just how much the boy needs. Muyuk explains that his grandmother, who raised him for 17 years, it requires heart surgery. For that, he needed 10 million won. In addition, he asked for 1 million won each month until his high school graduation to cover tuition and living expenses. His grandfather considered it 10 million won up front, plus 1 million a month after that. It was a trivial amount of money to him. He thought to himself that this kid didn't have any real courage, calling him all the way out here for what was, in his eyes, mere pocket change. But Muyuk quickly clarified that he wasn't asking for a handout. He was only borrowing the money. That remark made his grandfather smirk. He found it amusing. This kid couldn't even afford the interest, let alone the principal. Yet he was boldly framing this as a loan, not a handout. It was a ridiculous but strangely entertaining proposal. As a seasoned loan shark, the grandfather was used to lending money, but he never did it without guarantees. He told Muyuk that borrowers needed either collateral or credibility. Muyuk offered his brain as collateral. He vowed that if his grandfather lent him the money, he'd get into the Korean University Law School and repay both principal and interest with his future success. Inwardly, Muyuk recalled that in his past life, his grandfather was the one who had suggested this path, but this time, it was his own idea. Shinta-sen had always harbored a deep desire for academic achievement. He'd been denied a real education by poverty. But as his business empire exploded, so did his obsession with his kids' school smarts. Yet his sons, Chin Soo-win and Shin Soo-han, barely scraped into local colleges despite all his lavish spending. Even Muyuk's mother, despite getting into a prestigious Soo University, had dropped out and bailed on him. For Tazin, his grandson entering the elite Korean University Law School was a ridiculously enticing proposition, one that could finally crush his complex about his own lack of education. Despite his interest, the old man doubted Muyuk's skills and what he really knew. The kid's grades were pathetic for a feat like that. He wondered if Muyuk was just bluffing. To test his guts, he asked how confident Muyuk truly was and what he'd do if he failed. Muyuk knew there were no guarantees, even having tried this impossible path once before. But he had to grab every ounce of his grandfather's attention and favor at this critical moment. Boldly, he declared that on failure, he would surrender both his freedom and his very body. That promise appeared to satisfy the old man. Then Muyuk added his own condition. If he succeeded, he wanted a gift to celebrate this achievement. The grandfather, intrigued, asked if he wanted something else, to which Muyuk said he'd reveal his wish after getting into law school. He planned to demand a truly enormous reward at that moment. Amused, the grandfather let out a hearty laugh, agreeing to the deal. He'd wait eagerly to hear what grand gift the boy would dare to ask for. But he reminded Muyuk sternly, if he failed as he had promised, he would belong entirely to him, forced to obey every command, even tasks so terrifying they would make actual demons tremble in fear. Muyuk accepted the terms, calling him Grandpa. As their talk concluded and his grandfather finally departed, Muyuk watched him leave, thinking how the old man tried to scare him with his threats of fiendish tasks. He smirked to himself at the thought, embracing it. If that's what it took, he was ready to become a true fiend, one that would tear the entire Qian family to pieces. Later, as Tazin drove away with Hamong Hun, they discussed their encounter with Kim Muyuk. Tazin admitted that he found the boy quite entertaining. Hamong Hun shared that he was also shocked. Given how different Muyuk seemed compared to all the reports they had on him, Tazin reflected on his experiences, noting that in his business, he'd encountered all sorts of desperate people, those who'd borrow money and shamelessly come back for more. Those who sent gangsters to threaten him. Those who'd hold knives to their own stomachs in desperation. And even some who would sell their own kids for cash. With all that experience, he'd developed an instinct to read people at a glance. Just from their eyes, expressions, body language, and tone of voice. Yet, with Kim Muyuk, he admitted he was totally clueless. It felt like Muyuk was the one sizing him up instead. Among Hoon remarked that it seemed like Tazin had taken a liking to the boy. The scene cuts to Dahan Buen Hospital, where Kim Muyuk's grandmother was scheduled for surgery. Before the operation started, Muyuk made a heartfelt plea to the surgeon, asking them to please ensure his grandmother's safety. The doc told him not to sweat it, the procedure wasn't tough, and she'd be perfectly fine after the operation. As the op started, a deeply anxious Muyuk was approached by the infamous Park Dong-gu. Dong-gu casually asked if Muyuk was keeping up with school and eating well, then wondered if he had time for a smoke on the roof. Muyuk coolly pointed out that, as a high schooler, he probably shouldn't be hearing that kind of offer. He declined, saying he was busy studying. With a playful, dramatic sigh, Dong-gu started to tease him. Why is a young punk like you studying instead of living it up? But fine. If you really need to hit the books, he wouldn't keep him. Before taking off, Dong-gu tossed him a stick of chewing gum. He advised him to chew it if he felt sleepy, and promised to catch him later. Watching him go, Muyuk thought that at this point, Park Dong-gu was already a big-shot thug, the number 2 of a gang with hundreds of guys. Despite this, he found Dong-gu surprisingly funny. But then he recalled the government's upcoming war on crime. Dong-gu's fate was sealed. Stepping outside, Muyuk saw a car screech to a halt. Several men hopped out, weapons in hand, and stormed into the building. He instantly recognized the situation. Muyuk knew they were here to take out Park Dong-gu. A smirk crept onto his face. He knew Dong-gu wasn't fated to die today. Perhaps this little interruption could be my chance to win the man. Dong-gu, over to my side. The thugs burst into the hospital reception, demanding to know where Park Dong-gu's room was. The receptionist, terrified and trembling, stammered as she tried to stay composed, nervously asking their relationship with the patient. Their boss just scoffed, his eyes full of scorn, and snapped back, questioning if she was blind. His voice boomed as he declared they were here for a visit, sending a chill through the hall. Suddenly, a calm yet sharp voice cut through the tension. Muyuk appeared, his gaze firm, asking if they were looking for brother Dong-gu. His face was a cool mask as he introduced himself as Dong-gu's little bro and offered to guide them to his ward. As they followed him, Muyuk's mind was racing. These punks, raising hell in the hospital while my grandma is fighting for her life. His fists clenched, rage simmering just beneath his calm exterior. First, I'll get them outside, then we'll settle this. He led them from the bright hospital halls into a dim narrow alley, where long shadows stretched out. The tension grew thicker with every single step. After a bit, the gangster's boss got impatient, his voice sharp and menacing. He demanded to know where they were being led. Muyuk stopped dead in his tracks and turned slowly, his eyes like ice. He bluntly asked, "You came to kill Park Dong-gu?" The boss let out a wicked smirk, as if the kid's question was amusing. Without even a pause, he whipped out a gleaming knife, its blade catching the dim light. He sneered, admitting it, then snarled, demanding how a little punk like Muyuk figured it out. Mocking him, he lunged forward with the knife, ready to draw blood, but before the blade could land, a commanding voice echoed in the alley. Park Dong-gu stepped in, his aura radiating pure power. His glare shot daggers at the thugs for messing with a high school kid. His voice was laced with pure contempt, asking if they had any dignity left. Boiling with rage, a single gangster lunged straight for Park Dong-gu, swinging a fist with everything he had. Dong-gu didn't even blink. He boldly met the blow with his forehead. The punch connected with a crack, but it was like hitting solid rock. The thug howled in pain, cradling his now shattered hand. With brutal precision, Park Dong-gu countered with a crushing blow. Planting the goon face first on the pavement, he ripped off his hospital gown. The warrior unleashed, ready for war. The boss was the next to charge in, a knife gleaming in his hand. But Park Dong-gu saw it coming a mile away. He dodged, snagging the boss by his hair, and tossed him like a rag doll into another lackey. Their bodies smashed together with a sickening crunch. Instantly, Dong-gu spun and unleashed a massive kick on the boss, sending both him and the goon under him, flying deeper into the alley, slamming into the wall with brutal impact. Desperate and wild-eyed, the final goon fumbled for a weapon, snatching a shard of glass. With a feral roar, he slashed at Dong-gu, hoping to land a final, fatal blow. but Donggu's eyes burned with resolve. He met the glass mid-swing with his bare fist, instantly pulverizing it, and followed through with a bone-shattering punch to the thug's jaw, knocking him flat on his back. Out cold. As dust settled in the now silent alley, gangsters lay strewn about. Crushed by Park Donggu's absolute power, the hurricane they'd hoped to unleash on the hospital had backfired completely. They were simply outmatched. Later, Park Donggu and Kim Muyuk strolled back into the hospital, the former stretching out his limbs. Park Donggu felt a lot better after that little warm-up. He recalled the turf war where he first thrashed these clowns. He figured they'd show up for revenge while he was laid up, so he had been watching for them. However, Kim Muyuk was the one who led them here. Park Donggu had to admit the kid had guts. Not even flinching when they pulled a knife on him, Kim Muyuk replied, coolly, saying he knew Park Donggu would show up. He'd already spotted Park Donggu's men posted around the hospital. In his mind, Kim Muyuk knew that even without his intervention, the result would have been identical. Back then, Park Donggu could have crushed them without breaking a sweat. Park Donggu conceded he owed Kim Muyuk a favor and figured he'd pay it back. He offered to grant any wish the kid could possibly want. Cash. Lady. Anything. But Kim Muyuk was thinking, Park Donggu will be the first piece in my grand design. He was set on making him his pawn. Kim Muyuk then told Park Donggu to grab his most trusted men and vanish for 3 whole months. Park Donggu was floored, asking what the hell Kim Muyuk was talking about. He'd asked for a wish, not some crazy talk. Park Donggu demanded to know why on earth he should have to go into hiding. Kim Muyuk explained that the president was about to declare a war on crime, issuing a nationwide warrant for every single criminal group. A stunned Park Donggu asked, seriously, a real war on crime is coming? Kim Muyuk confirmed it. He said that in October 1990, the president dropped a special decree to silence critics and shift focus from the regime's countless corruptions. While there were crackdowns on the 5 major crimes last year, this upcoming war against crime is on a totally different scale. This is a massive operation to wipe out crime syndicates and all their little offshoots. Kim Muyuk tells Park Donggu to keep their hideout secret, even from their own organization's members. He stresses to him, be wary of your boss, Lee Song. That is Kim Muyuk's only wish. After saying this, Kim Muyuk leaves. In his mind, he muses that it's all up to Park Donggu now. If Park Donggu can make it out alive, he'll become a very useful piece on the board one day. A month later, at Urism Mountain, Park Donggu and his crew are glued to the news. The broadcast declares an all-out war on crime and violence, with the goal of eradicating all criminal organizations. The Constitution gives the president total authority to completely crush them all. It is October 13th, 1990. The war on crime is official. Seeing the news, Park Donggu's crew is absolutely stunned. They freak out over the sheer scale of it, yelling that every prosecutor and police officer has been mobilized, and every gang in Buan has been busted. Even big shot Seong Him, Park Donggu orders his guys to lay low and not make a single move. They obey, vowing to follow his lead. As Park Donggu scans the newspaper, he freezes. He thinks of Kim Muyuk, realizing everything's happening exactly like that kid predicted it would. He wonders to himself who Kim Muyuk really is, realizing the boy is no ordinary kid. In the next scene, we see Chien Taeyan, Kim Muyuk's grandfather, arranging for both Kim Muyuk and his grandma to live in a brand new apartment he provided. It's a humble but cozy place, feeling like a brand new beginning for the small family. Looking around the apartment, Kim Muyuk is filled with a sense of relief and deep gratitude. He tells his grandmother that his grandfather handled everything lightning fast. He even jokingly dubs him Namchizen, admiring how quickly everything was settled. But just as his grandmother opens her mouth to reply, perhaps to share her worries or feelings, but Kim Muyuk gently stops her. He says firmly that this apartment was given to them by his grandfather, the man who just reappeared after 17 long years. He continues, explaining that his grandfather gave them enough money for living expenses, meaning she no longer has to work herself to exhaustion. His grandmother's face shows nothing but hesitation and doubt. She quietly says she's not sure if it's all right to accept this much help. But Kim Muyuk's resolve doesn't falter one bit. His voice is filled with sincerity, reminding her of the immense hardships she faced while raising him all on her own. He tells her she deserves this comfort, and so much more. He reassures her, promising if she can just hang on a little longer, he'll ensure she lives a truly comfortable and peaceful life. He urges her to just focus on her health from now on, and not to worry about anything else. At that exact moment, their buddies Mongu and Park Young burst in, their energy taking over the room. They greet the grandmother warmly, wishing her well on her hospital discharge. Grandma's face just beams with joy, seeing them, her 2 other grandsons, as she affectionately calls them. like they were truly her own flesh and blood. With a massive grin, Mangsu declares they snagged some pork belly for her on the way. He says they should fire up the grill and have a little celebration feast. The mood instantly skyrockets as they all gather round to prep the meal. Laughter and chatter erupt as they dig into good food with even better company. Soaking in this rare, happy moment. The scene flips to the next day at school. The trio strolls together through the school grounds. A cool breeze brushing past their faces. Mangu stretches wide, remarking on how awesome the weather feels today. But then groans that test results are out today, totally killing his vibe. Hearing this, Park Young just explodes with laughter, finding the whole thing hilarious. Irked, Mangu shoots him a death glare and snaps at him not to laugh, reminding him Park Young's not doing any better himself. Park Young sputters, trying to defend himself, puffing his chest out with fake pride. He boasts he's better off, ranked in the top 500 out of 520 students. Mangu scoffs and fires right back, saying he's ranked 451st, and tells Park Young not to get so cocky. Their bickering instantly explodes into a playful scuffle. A totally harmless, hilarious catfight between two best buds, earning some chuckles from nearby students. In the middle of the chaos, Park Young turns to Kim Muyuk, his tone curious. He asks how Kim Muyuk's test went, mentioning he saw him hitting the books hard lately. Kim Muyuk just gives a modest reply, saying he improved a bit, but still needs to grind way harder to see some real results. Inside his head, Kim Muyuk reflects honestly. He admits it was tough getting back in the study groove after such a long break, but he somehow managed to pull through and did a pretty decent job. As they step into class, another student rushes up to Kim Muyuk. Looking totally hyped and a little out of breath, he drops the bombshell. Kim Muyuk ranked first on this exam. Mangu, stunned, immediately asks if he's for real, demanding to know how he found out. The kid explains he overheard the teachers talking about it in the office this morning. Before they can even process this, another student bursts into the classroom, shouting for Kim Muyuk. He tells him their homeroom teacher's calling him to the office. Grinning with pure excitement, Mangu nudges Kim Muyuk and teases him, asking what's up now. He jokes if Kim Muyuk's getting an award and tells him to hurry up. Muyuk steps into the teacher's office, where his homeroom teacher, Park, is waiting. Not wasting a second, Teacher Park glares and asks if he knows why he was summoned here. Muyuk, totally composed, politely replies that he doesn't know why. Hearing this, Teacher Park's face contorts with rage. Without a single hesitation, he smacks Muyuk hard across the face, outside the window. Their classmates see the whole thing, and, watching this, pure rage begins to boil up inside them. Park, clearly not finished, demands again in a sharp tone if Muyuk really has no clue why he was called in. Once more, Muyuk's firm, "I don't know," gets him a harsh slap. Teacher Park, enraged by this, completely loses it and shouts at him, demanding what trick Muyuk pulled on the test. He gets in his face, dead sure that he must have cheated. Park sneers. "You, the school's bottom feeder, suddenly acing the first exam of the second semester, don't make me laugh." Inside, Muyuk's thoughts hardened like cold steel. He knew exactly what this was about. He thought bitterly, that absolute bastard, Teacher Park. It was all because of that incident a few days back. The scene shifts. Teacher Park was sneering down at Muyuk, saying he'd heard the man in that fancy foreign car was none other than Muyuk's own grandfather. He smugly said the old man should have paid respects since he was Muyuk's homeroom teacher. After all, Muyuk stood firm, retorting that his grandpa was in Sioux. If Teacher Park wanted a meeting so badly, he could just go there himself, he added coldly, calling his grandfather an old beast. A trashy monster committed to being exactly that. More than he recalled, Teacher Park pressed, saying the grandpa would surely show his face again to see Muyuk. He told Muyuk to set up a meeting for them. But before Teacher Park could even finish his demand, Muyuk cut him off, saying exams were close so he'd take his leave. Offering a sarcastic thanks before walking out, Teacher Park yelled for him to wait. But Muyuk didn't listen. And we're back to the present. Teacher Park keeps hammering Muyuk, accusing him of cheating and demanding to know who his accomplices were. Muyuk fires back. "I did not cheat," Park just scoffs. "You little bastard." And then lays the insults on even thicker. He claimed he let Muyuk slide with his past troubles, but messing with the sanctity of school exams was crossing a line. He cruelly asks if it was his grandmother who taught him how to cheat. Hearing this, something inside Muyuk snapped. Asterisk. This scumbag. He's really crossing the line now. Asterisk. He felt a burning rage building up from deep inside. Park sees the death glare and snaps. "I'll dig those eyes out, Muyuk." Finally done holding back, roars out his demand. He tells Park to apologize immediately, whether he studied hard or not, or even if he cheated. It had nothing to do with his grandma. He demanded an apology on the spot. Park, absolutely seething with rage, slaps Muyuk again, screaming, "Are you insane?" without a shred of proof. Park declares all of Muyuk's exams will be marked as 0 for cheating. Then, in a blind rage, he rips up all of Muyuk's test papers, yelling that, as of today, Muyuk is suspended indefinitely. He adds that he'd honestly rather just expel him right now. But Muyuk's eyes were now blazing with cold resolve. He fires back with a bold challenge. Teacher Park. How about a little wager, Park? Completely taken aback. Demands to know what kind of bet. Muyuk confidently lays out all of the terms. I'll retake the exam. Right now. In front of everyone. And answer every question the exact same way. If I fail to get the same score, I will drop out of this school on my own. But if I get the same score, you resign. The room erupted in shocked gasps. The teachers and students were all stunned by his audacious gamble. Teacher Park seethed, calling Muyuk an arrogant little piece of trash. He lifts his bat to crush Muyuk. But Muyuk charges forward, yelling, challenging him directly. He demands the tests immediately, asking if Park is just too scared to face him. With blazing focus, Muyuk starts crushing the tests, knocking out each subject. And just like that, he finishes all subjects but English, incredibly scoring a perfect 100 on each of them. Seeing this, Park is left completely speechless. Another teacher warns Mr. Park that if Muyuk also gets a perfect score in English, you're gonna have to pack your bags and resign. Muyuk smirks, teasing Park. What's wrong? You scared? He mockingly offers Park an escape route, saying if he apologizes right now, he'll call off the English test and Park can keep his job. Just then, the vice principal storms in, absolutely furious. He demands to know what Park is doing and orders them to stop. He declares that Muyuk has already proven his innocence. Facing Mr. Park, he roars at him, asking what's wrong with his head. Instead of praising a student like Muyuk, Park pulled this shameful stunt instead. He commands Park to apologize. With absolutely no other choice, Isher Park bows his head and mumbles an apology. Muyuk slams his hand on the desk and declares he's heading back to class. The second he leaves the teacher's office, his classmates just explode into wild cheers, screaming his name with total awe. Later, Mangu, Muyuk, and Hongsung are all huddled up, talking. Mangu is totally buzzing, remembering Teacher Park's sour face. He laughs about how badly Park screwed up. Then, getting serious, he asks if Muyuk is for real, the #1 student in the whole school. Kyung, just as hyped, jumps in. He asks if it's true Muyuk's aiming for the top-tier Korean university. Muyuk answers with cool resolve. He tells Mangu to get serious about studying and promises he'll help. Then turning to Kong, he tells him to get back to judo and aim for a special college admission, showing he believes in them. As they talk, Muyuk's mind briefly wanders to the past. He remembers Mangu actually got pretty good grades back in middle school. He could have easily gone the academic route, but picked a vocational school for his real passion. Hung was also a killer judo athlete back in middle school. Even though their school had no sports team, Hung decided to enroll there anyway, because he couldn't leave his best buds. But reality bites. Mangu asks what's the point of studying now, wondering if he should just take over his dad's nightclub business. Hyung lets out a sigh, saying his body feels all stiff and rusty. He's even thinking about a factory job to get by. In response, Muyuk puts a firm hand on each of their shoulders, his voice full of power. He explains that soon. He's got a huge mission to pull off in Sue, but he admits he can't possibly do it all by himself. He tells them he truly needs them to be there with him. With a look of pure determination, he asks them to grind hard together and chase their Sue dreams as real friends. But deep down, Muyuk thought, just knowing the future wasn't enough for his revenge. He couldn't win this war solo. No matter what, he needed allies who'd stand by his side. A crew that would never stab him in the back. No matter what, he believed in his crew. He'd bet his life on them. Mu hit the books harder than ever. His focus absolute. As a result, he easily ranked first in the second semester finals. Miyu's grades still weren't flawless, but she was definitely leveling up. Inspired, Kung started whipping his body back into shape. Step by step, bit by bit, their lives were finally getting on the right track. And then, Muak finally arrived in Seoul, once again standing before his grandfather's estate. Snow fell hard, cloaking everything in pure white. Seeing that familiar house, a wave of emotions crashed over him. He was back. Back to the impenetrable fortress of the Qin clan. This place, along with Hanamong, was one of the wealthiest districts in the entire country. And here, Chiant Tazin's massive fortress loomed over the city. Back in the day, she and Tazin were number one in cash power. Not even the Third Republic, which took power in a military coup. Nor the Fifth Republic that pulled another one just like it. Not even the current government could touch this stronghold. The Lone Shark King's impenetrable fortress had defied them all, shielding his fortune from the grubby hands of any political power. Later on that evening, Mook and his grandpa, Chi and Tan, sat at the dinner table. Muyuk thought quietly to himself, This scene never happened in my past life. Back then, I only met Chi and Tazin way later, after getting into Korea University's law school. But this time is different. The old man's opinion of me has already started to change. After dinner, they both settled onto the sofa, enjoying a quiet moment with tea in their hands. Warm steam drifted lazily into the air as they sipped. The soft clink of teacups filled the silence, until his grandfather broke it with a proud comment. He'd heard Muyuk ranked number one for 2 semesters in a row. Even if the school wasn't exactly top tier, it proved Muyuk wasn't just running his mouth before. His grandfather admitted that results like those were proof of a sharp mind. Hearing that praise straight from his grandfather's lips, a smirk spread across Muyuk's face. His chest puffed out with a quiet pride. Moments like this, when his grind was actually noticed, felt so damn good. His grandfather eyed him thoughtfully, then said that since Muyuk was a man who kept his word, he wanted to give him a gift. He asked if there was anything Muyuk wanted. Muyuk, cool as ever, replied that, just like he said before, he'd tell his grandfather what he wants after getting into university. His voice was completely unshaken, but in his head, he couldn't help but wonder just where this little chat was going. But the old man wasn't about to let it go that easy. With a small smirk, he reminded Muyuk of his promise. If he got into Korea University Law School, he'd grant him any wish he desired. But even now, he told him to speak up if he wanted something right now. Asterisk, hey. Asterisk, Muya thought to himself, a little amused. Was Gramps playing the kind, doting grandfather role? If so, asking for something simple couldn't hurt. He figured he might as well play the part. An allowance seemed like a harmless enough request, but instead of cash, Muyuk, with a sly glint in his eye, asked his grandfather for company stock. His grandfather raised an eyebrow, surprised, and asked if Muyuk even knew a thing about the stock market. With a small, innocent smile, Muyuk confessed he knew very little. That's why he needed his grandfather's wisdom. If he were to invest now, which company's stocks would be the absolute smartest bet to make? Inside, Muyuk thought that asking for stock, not cash, would seem like a harmless ask from a curious grandkid. Maybe his grandfather would find it amusing. The old man let out a soft chuckle, clearly entertained by Muyuk's clever play. Instantly, he called for Director Ha to join them. The air in the room grew a bit tense, but still warm. Chairman Shin, in his commanding voice, asked Director Ha about their holdings in Daehan Corporation. Director Ha checked and said they held a 4% stake. Without a second thought, Chairman Shin ordered him to transfer the whole stake over to Muyuk, since it was a gift for his precious grandson. He stressed that the taxes must be handled cleanly to avoid future trouble. The director bowed, respectfully acknowledging the chairman's instructions. He assured him it would all be handled without a hitch. Muyuk's mind reeled, processing it. Daehan Corporation. At that time, Daehan was the undisputed king of conglomerates, dwarfing all other chaebols. In South Korea, a chaebol is a massive family-run empire dominating the economy. But after the founder's death, vicious infighting among the heirs eventually tore the entire group apart. Daehan's stock wasn't just about the money. It was about legacy, power, and raw influence. Overwhelmed by it all, Muyuk turned to his grandfather, giving his deepest thanks for the insane gift. Inwardly, he smirked at the situation. It was nearly impossible to get your hands on Daehan's shares, no matter how much cash you had. Honestly, he'd only asked for a little pocket money, but fate had just handed him a massive, unexpected jackpot. What he thought would be a small token had blown up into something absolutely monumental. At that moment, his uncle In-sok, his aunt So-myung, and their son Jihan entered the room. Their polite smiles hid dark secrets. Muyuk's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. To himself, he thought, these people reeked of suspicion. Of everyone here, they were the ones most likely to have ordered his death. Or maybe it wasn't just one of them, but all of them. plotting together in the dark. His gaze turned to ice. This time, he swore he wouldn't go down so easily. He'd make them pay dearly for what they did. He would make sure of it. Chairman Shin's voice cut through his thoughts, introducing them as Muyuk's aunt and uncles. He told Muyuk to greet them properly. Warning bells rang in his head. And Muyuk reminded himself to be cautious. They definitely fit the culprit's profile. But what if he was dead wrong? He couldn't make a reckless move now. He had to be a ghost. Unseen until the perfect moment. Crushing the storm in his chest, Muyuk lowered his head with perfect deference, offering a deeply respectful bow. His intro was a flawless mask of calm, hiding his sharp suspicions under perfect manners. Shin Soman sized him up for a long moment, then spoke. He acknowledged Muyuk as Msuk's son, commenting on the hard path the boy had walked. Growing up without his mother and raised by his grandmother alone, a flash of fake warmth hit his face as he welcomed Muyuk back into the family. He offered hollow words of support, saying that if Muyuk ever needed anything, he should not hesitate to ask. After all, they were family. But under the surface, his eyes were weighing Muyuk, as if calculating his precise worth. The scene snaps. Chien Tasan is in a private talk with Chien Swan Suman and his wife. His voice, a quiet blade of authority, asks his son Suman about his mother-in-law's business. He'd heard whispers the Samsung group was feeling the pressure. But Suman's wife was quick to reassure him. Brushing off all the concerns, she swore it was all fine, insisting the media was just stirring the pot with fake news. Like they always do. She reminded her dad of her father-in-law's steel, a man who couldn't be rattled by mere gossip. Chien Tasan gave a knowing nod. He agreed, calling the man ruthless. Someone who shed neither blood nor tears in pursuit of his grand ambitions. Still, Chien Tasan told her to pass on a message. If they ever found themselves needing a hand, they could count on him. In-laws are family. And he couldn't, in good conscience, just leave them out to dry. His daughter vowed to pass it on, bowing her head in thanks. Then, turning his sharp gaze to Suhan, Chien Tasan inquired about Mr. Kim. Suhan said that his father-in-law was doing just fine, keeping up his political game with zero issues. Chien Tasan's expression hardened. He advised Suhan to tell Mr. Asian Kim to seek him out if he ever found himself needing cash. There's no reason to get busted over petty illicit funds. He then switched gears, his tone turning to ice. He asked if any of them had recently sent cash to President Lee Haku. It's a dumb move, he warned, to just hand over cash. You gotta make him crawl and grovel for your help before you offer up anything. Giving cash up front is a total fool's move. Suman flinched, a single bead of tension rising. He reminded his father they knew exactly who was backing President Lee Haku. The fallout would be dangerous. Suman quickly agreed, his voice tight with nerves. If they backed out on their promise now, he warned, Kim On-pong would not let it slide. This balance of power was on a knife's edge. One wrong move could bring a disaster none of them were ready to face. Muyuk entered his mother's room, taking a second to just absorb the space. Deep down in his heart, he thought to himself that this room was exactly the same as it had been in his past life. As he browsed through all his mother's books, his gaze then locked onto a familiar photograph. He knew it in an instant. This was the only photo of his mother he ever found in his past life. His grandfather hadn't left behind any other pictures of her, as if he wished to erase her from the face of the earth. Just then, a sharp knock echoed at the door. A voice asked if he was Msuk's son. Muyuk's gaze shifted to the door, and he knew that face instantly. It was Cheon Jun. He knew it instantly. This was the guy who likely ordered his death. In Jun's eyes, Muyuk had always been an eyesore, a rival threatening his precious path to that sweet inheritance. Jun nonchalantly said Muyuk was in Busan before this, and asked how moving from the countryside to Seoul felt, assuming it must be hard to adjust. Playing dumb, Muyuk coldly shot back. And you are? Jun's brow furrowed, baffled by the attitude. He asked why Muyuk was being so damn disrespectful. He reminded him he was older and wondered aloud if Hicks from Busan didn't know any manners. Inwardly, Muyuk just found it absolutely laughable. Jun hadn't changed one bit, past or present. He was the same petty punk, remarkably consistent. Muyuk placed his book down. Muyuk stepped closer, stared Jun dead in the eye, and rudely shot back that his age didn't matter one bit. Jun spoke to him informally first. So why on earth should he show this guy any respect? Jun was stunned for a second, struggling to process Muyuk's defiance. Muyuk smirked. Jun probably never expected this kind of reaction. This was likely the first time anyone had ever shown him such open hostility. After all, Jun was the son of the eldest heir to the loan shark king of Mongdom, and his mom was the eldest daughter of the chairman of the Samsung Group, one of the top conglomerates in the entire business world. Who would dare to treat him with disrespect? But that punk Cheon-jun? Muyuk had absolutely no intention of backing down. Without losing his cool, Muyuk declared no one should act so damn arrogant in front of him. He scoffed, asking Jun why he was even here, then started mocking him. He asked how much money Jun wanted to leave. Would 100 million won be enough? In a place like Busan, Jun could live like a chaebol. Muyuk thought to himself that Jun was repeating the exact same lines as before. Back then, Muyuk had been too powerless to say anything, just standing there like a complete idiot. But now, with a sarcastic tone, Muyuk praised Jun's generosity, calling him brother and asking if he planned to give his younger sibling some pocket money. Yun, confused, asked what he meant by pocket money. Muyuk continued to mock him, saying, "Isn't 100 million won just pocket change? In Jagali, that much would barely buy a single plate of sashimi." Yun, annoyed, smirked and insulted him, saying this is why Muyuk didn't have any parents. He mentioned that Muyuk's grandmother raised him and sneered that looking at Muyuk, he could tell what state that old woman was in. Hearing this, rage flared in Muyuk. He punched the door right by Jun's face, startling him. Then, with pure ice in his voice, he warned that yes, his grandmother had raised him, and if Jun wanted to get his ass kicked by a country bumpkin who learned nothing because he had no parents, he was welcome to try. Jun was visibly shaken. He stammered that Muyuk wouldn't get away with this, assaulting the eldest son of the Chin family like that. He threatened to go tell his grandfather right this second. But Muyuk just snapped back, calling him a moron and telling him to get a grip. Here in Shinjun, Samsung's reckless heir was so hooked on party favors he was about to start smuggling them, a mess that would blow up in the headlines. Jun froze, pure terror in his eyes, asking what Muyuk was on about. Muyuk smirked, pushing him harder, asking if he wanted to hear about the other chaebol kid's little party that sent a girl to the hospital. Jun, completely terrified, yelled, asking how Muyuk knew all that. Muyuk, cool as ever, said the key fact was that Jun was just a punk kid. Muyuk was sure he could walk downstairs right now and spill every single detail to his grandpa. Then he asked Jun if he'd like to join him. Asterisk, heh. Asterisk, Muyuk thought. Asterisk, I know every screw-up Jun caused in my past life. And shockingly, the trouble Jun had caused till now was just a warm-up for the train wrecks ahead. Coley. Muyuk told him if he wanted the big brother title, he'd better start acting the part. Then, strolling to the bed, Muyuk sat and waved Jun off, saying he was tired. Jun, with fear written all over his face, yelled not to breathe a word of this, warning that if Muyuk did, one of them wasn't making it out alive. He demanded to know if Muyuk got it. With a cocky smile, Muyuk asked if that was a plea or a threat. Jun swallowed his pride and stammered that it was a request. Muyuk just replied that he got it, repeating that he understood. Now scram. After Jun bolted, Muyuk sat there, lost in his thoughts, wondering if Jun was really the punk who tried to off him in his past life. The thought was galling, that he could have been taken out by a loser like that. The scene cuts to the next morning. Muyuk steps out, a small bag in hand, ready to head back to Busan. Right as he's about to go, his grandfather's calm yet firm voice calls out, asking if he's heading out now. Muyuk turns to his grandfather, nods respectfully, and confirms that yes, he'll be on his way now. Addressing him with a warm reverence, the chairman, maintaining his usual composed expression, simply tells him to go. Before leaving, Muyuk looks at his grandfather with resolve and vows he will visit often, his words carrying both fondness and firm resolve. As Muyuk steps out into the open, the air is crisp and cool. He heads for the car waiting to take him to Busan. Just then, Director Ha comes up, clutching an envelope in his hands. With a polite but serious tone, Director Ha offers the envelope to Muyuk, explaining it contains 100 million won. He adds that this is a special gift from the chairman, not just some random cash. Director Ha says the chairman feels owning Dean stock isn't enough to secure Muyuk's future. He then adds a crucial detail. The passcode for the funds is the anniversary of the young lady's birth. No. He corrects himself, clarifying it's the date of Muyuk's mother's passing, making the gesture deeply personal and heartfelt. Hearing this, Muyuk pauses for a second, thoughts racing through his head. He wonders silently if the chairman has always been this meticulous and thoughtful in handling things. It's a surprise how deeply the old man seems to care. With a flash of gratitude. So, Muyuk asks the director how to properly thank the big boss. Director Ha, though, suggests a more personal touch. He tells Muyuk to just call the chairman himself. Positive the old man has been waiting by the phone for him, hoping to hear his voice directly. Time skips ahead. And now, Muyuk's posted up in his brand new classroom, sunlight blasted through the windows. He glanced around, taking in this new chapter of his life. He's officially a second-year student now, in a totally different class. The faces around him are all new. But it's comforting to know, Myung-soo is hitting the books hard, grinding away at his studies day after day, and Hans, he's gone all in with the judo club, pouring his heart and soul into every single throw. Muyuk couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Everyone was giving it their all in their own unique way, holding tight to that one promise they made. The vow to get into an SU university together. That sheer will in their hearts keeps them all moving forward. Just then, the classroom door slid open, and a new presence made its grand entrance. Every head snapped toward the newcomer as the teacher announced he was a transfer student. All the way from SU, the teacher told the class to pay attention and give him a proper welcome. The new guy stood confidently, facing them, introducing himself with a slick smile. He said his name was Hong Jimyo, that he came from SU, and it was a pleasure to meet them all. His intro left a mark as he took his seat. A new story was quietly starting to unfold. Later, the new kid, Hong Jinpyo, is chowing down with some new buddies. Feeling curious, he asks them who the top dog of the school is. A guy explains there's no official boss, but Kim Muyuk is the closest thing. Jinpyo, hooked, asks what year Kim Muyuk's in. His new pal says Muyuk's a sophomore and, without a doubt, the strongest dude here. He explained how last year, right at the start, the seniors rounded up every student who looked like a threat. Back then, Kim Muyuk was just trying to catch some Z's when two seniors screamed at him to get up. But Muyuk ignored him, staying asleep. Then one idiot smacked him hard on the head, waking him. As Muyuk got up, he gave them a killer death glare before totally demolishing both of them. After that beatdown, he warned everyone not to bug him since he planned on sleeping. He just lay back down like it was nothing. Ever since, not just his classmates, but even the upperclassmen wouldn't dare to mess with him. For a kid his age, he was scarily powerful. But these days, he just keeps to himself, focused completely on his studies. Jinpyo just smirked at the tale. He thought it was hilarious that some top-tier fighter was laying low just to study. He figured Muyuk was just some cocky punk and thought it'd be fun to knock him down a peg. His friend, however, warned him not to start a pointless fight, reminding him that Muyuk was on a whole other level of crazy. But Jinpyo just waved it off, saying that being a good brawler doesn't automatically mean you'll win. He reminded them they followed him not because he won some fights, but because his dad is the chief prosecutor. Then he sneered, wondering what kind of job Kim Muyuk's old man had. Yeah, it was obvious. Jinpyo was just a typical spoiled rich brat, riding his daddy's coattails and power for kicks. His buddy shot back that Muyuk was an orphan, living with his grandma. He had a grandpa, but he was a total mystery. Hearing this, the guy let out a sneer, thinking it was hilarious that Muyuk was parentless. Meanwhile, Kim Muyuk and Mangu were just chilling at the playground. Mangu said Hyung hit the sports club again. Muyuk just nodded, knowing Hyung had been slacking off for quite a while. But now he was dead set on a P.E. college. The dude was even following a crazy diet. Mangu joked that their little Hung-sung was finally growing up. Then he suddenly switched gears, asking Muyuk if he'd heard of the new transfer kid. Hong Jimyo from Soo said Jinpyo was some pretty boy with a grating Soo accent. Muyuk, totally clueless about the name, just asked, "Who's Hong Jimyo?" Mangu had to remind him. "He's the chief prosecutor's kid. The transfer from Soo." Muyuk just shrugged, saying he was too buried in books to notice. He remembered how Jimyo used his dad's clout to basically own the entire school. Mangu went on, saying that with all the seniors away on a school trip, Gio had started his own crew, turning freshmen into his personal lackeys. The whole school was now basically Jimyo's turf. Then, Mangu showed Muyuk a photo of Jinpyo's crew, giving him a good look at the threat. Mangu warned Muyuk, "Dude, stay far away from that guy." He was dead serious, not just kidding around, totally confused. Mangu asked why he'd ever mess with him, telling Muyuk not to worry about it. But Muyuk just said it again, warning Mangu one more time, "Don't get involved." His voice was sharp. No room for games. Trying to ease the tension. Mangu just laughed it off. All right, man." He started teasing Muyuk. "Man, you're such a worrywart. Does that dude have some dirt on you or something?" he joked, wondering why Muyuk was so on edge. And right then, a flashback from his past life slammed into his mind. He recalled that day in class when he was totally buried in his books, completely zoned in, until a panicked Hyung-sung burst in. Hyung yelled that Jimyo and his crew were absolutely destroying Myung-soo. They had beaten Mongu so badly that he couldn't even get back on his feet. Hong couldn't believe they'd take it that far. But back then, Muyuk had shot back with an icy, "That's not my problem." He just wanted to hit the books and didn't want to waste his time on any other drama. Zapping back to the present, Muyuk cringed, remembering how he'd refused to get involved in anything he deemed annoying. Because of that, he'd even turned his back on Mongu, his best bud. But this time, he vowed to himself he would never again abandon anyone precious to him, no matter the cost. The scene snaps back to the classroom. Mangu was trying to study when Jimyo and his crew rolled up on him. Jio asked Mangu if he was tight with that dude named Muyuk. He heard whispers that Kim Muyuk was a monster in a fight, and wanted to know if the rumors were legit. Without missing a beat, Mangu shot back that they shouldn't even bother. He told them Muyuk was a total bookworm now and had zero connection to him. Jimpyo just smirked, acting like it was all a joke. He asked if Muyuk was fine with him taking over this dump. Sarcastically, Muyuk flipped him the bird and told him to go right ahead, whether he boiled this school or grilled it. Muyuk didn't care. But Jimpyo, still smirking, "I just had to say," said it was a real shame. Admitting Muyuk really got under his skin. Annoyed, Mangu demanded to know what Muyuk ever did to him. He questioned why Jimpyo was hassling someone who just wanted to study in peace. Jimpyo explained coldly, "He just hates it when people think some random punk is better than him." He added, even his own crew seemed more scared of Muyuk than him. And he despised it. Frustrated, Mangu screamed at Jimpyo to just leave Muyuk alone already. One of Jimpyo's lackeys lost his cool and lunged forward to deck Mangu, calling him a loser and demanding who he thought he was to talk like that. He sneered at Mangu, saying that if it weren't for all this, he'd be shivering in a corner like a rat. But Jimpyo stopped his goon, holding him back. He stared at Mangu and said his philosophy was simple. He takes what he wants, and he absolutely crushes whatever he wants to crush. Mangu furiously screamed that he was a total psycho, completely insane, and without any warning, Jimpyo's cronies brutally slammed Mangu's head down hard onto a bench. Jimpyo, unfazed, remarked this was only because Mangu was tight with that bastard Muyuk and told him not to take it so personally. He then ordered his goons to drag Mangu over to him. Meanwhile, Muyuk was deep in study when a classmate suddenly rushed over. Panicking, he frantically told Muyuk that something terrible had happened. Mangu had been dragged off by Han Jimpyo, and Jimpyo was calling for Muyuk to come to the annex's band room. Hearing this, Muyuk shot to his feet and bolted for the band room, his mind racing. As he ran, he thought to himself, just as I expected. No matter how much I try to dodge it, fate always catches up. Just then, Hyung also started running right alongside Muyuk, his face filled with worry. He asked Muyuk what this was about Mangu being taken by some guy named Jimpyo. Muyuk told him firmly to stay back, that he would handle this alone. But Hyung, clearly frustrated, just snapped back. How could he possibly just stand by while Mangu was dragged off by some random damn punk? Muyuk's mind flashed to Hyung-sung's future. After a year of intense training, he'd become a rising judo star in Busan. But if he got caught up in a school violence incident, he could be forced to give up on his dreams. With that in mind, Muyuk calmly told him to chill out, reminding him that he's an athlete. Getting mixed up in this mess would seriously hurt his chances for college admission. But Hyung just wasn't hearing any of it. He yelled that he didn't give a damn about that crap right now. How could he worry about college when his friend Mangu was in danger? If anything happened to Mangu, he swore he'd personally wreck that bastard Jimpyo. Muyuk raised his voice too, shouting out Park Hyung-sung's name. He reminded him what he'd said before, that he had things to do, and he needed both Hyung-sung and Mangu by his side for the future. So he told Hyung to just let him handle this. Hyung-sung, still worried, asked if he was sure. Muyuk snatched a nearby stick and told him not to let a single soul pass. Not a teacher. Not anyone. Just focus on that, he insisted. Hyung asked once more, worried if Muyuk was really gonna fight them all alone. Muyuk smirked, asking if Hyung had forgotten just who he was. He was Kim Muyuk. After all, wasting no more time, Muyuk stormed the band room, his eyes locked onto Mangu, bleeding from his nose and mouth on the floor. A mob of 7 to 8 guys surrounded him, and at the center of it all was Jimyo. Spotting Muyuk, Jimyo smirked, feigning surprise. So, they weren't just bluffing after all. He'd heard that if you touched Mangu, Muyuk would definitely appear. And look, here he is, Jimyo added if Muyuk hadn't come. He'd have snapped Mangu's ankle and sent him over. My dear Mangu is a lucky guy. Jimyo sneered. Barely conscious. Mangu weakly called to Muyuk, asking why he was there. Muyuk's burning gaze locked on Jimyo. He demanded why. If Jimyo had business with him, he hadn't come to him directly. Why drag my friends into this? Jimyo just laughed. Playing dumb at first. Then he sarcastically pretended to remember why. He smirked, admitting he did it simply because he thought it'd be fun. Muyuk's eyes narrowed. If it's fun Jimyo wanted, he should send Mangu out and play with him instead. He promised he'd make it way more fun for Jimyo. Jimyo just scoffed at his words, mocking him, asking if they were shooting some movie about Busan's loyalty. Still sneering. Jimyo agreed. Then Jimyo turned to his goons and ordered them to thrash Muyuk. But the others froze. Pure fear on their faces. Everyone knew exactly how strong Muyuk was. Seeing them frozen, Jimyo roared, reminding them who his father was. He threatened that, if they didn't obey, he'd get them expelled in a minute. Spurred on by that fear, the gang grabbed their bats and charged at Muyuk. But Muyuk dodged every single swing with ease. One by one, he countered, landing punches that dropped some to the floor, tossing others aside with powerful blows. Within just a few minutes, he had completely dismantled the entire group. Jimyo watched in shock, his eyes wide in disbelief. In a desperate move, he snatched Mangu by the hair, pressing a blade to his throat. Jimyo warned Muyuk that if he took just one more step, he'd end Mangu right there. Without a single hesitation, Muyuk lunged and landed a massive punch right on Jimyo's face, sending him flying to the floor. Blood streamed from Jimyo's nose as he just lay there, completely stunned. Kim Muyuk exploded in fury, cursing Jimyo out with pure rage, calling him a scumbag, asking if he really thought he could get away with this. But Jimyo, clinging to his pride, yelled back that his father was a prosecutor, not just any prosecutor, but the chief prosecutor. He taunted Muyuk, asking if he still didn't get what that meant. Muyuk pinned Jimyo down, straddling his stomach with burning eyes. He just scoffed at Jimyo's claim, mocking the very title of chief prosecutor. He declared a chief prosecutor could only let someone rot away in a cell, but fists were much closer than the law. Without hesitation, Muyuk drove his fist straight into Jimyo's face, snarling that this was for messing with his friend, Mangu. He followed it with another crushing punch, making it plain this was for dragging him from his sacred study time. Clutching Jimyo's ankle in a death grip, Muyuk's eyes blazed with fury. He snarled, "And this times is for shattering Mangu's ankle." Terrified, Jimyo shrieked for him to stop, begging. But Muyuk ignored his pathetic cries. Without an ounce of mercy, he twisted Jimyo's ankle till it snapped. Later on, Kim Muyuk is seen chilling inside a holding cell at Nambu police station. Soon, Kyu-sung's dad shows up, saying Kyu-sung told him how Muyuk ended up in the slammer for saving Mangu. Muyuk, worried, asks if Mangu is okay. Kyu-sung's father confirms that Mangu is fine. He wasn't hurt badly. Muyuk recalls that Kyu-sung's father, being a cop, had often helped them cover up the messes they'd gotten themselves into. But Kyu-sung's father warned him this situation was dead serious. Muyuk had picked a fight with the wrong dude, the son of a deputy prosecutor. As a cop, he confessed, his hands were tied, and apologized, saying there was nothing he could do to help. Muyuk then politely asks for a favor. He just needs to make one phone call, promising it would just take a second. Kyu-sung's father nods and tells him to go for it. As night descends, Jimyo's father storms the station to face Muyuk. Seeing him, he furiously demands if he's the one who crippled his precious son's leg. Muyuk explains it went down in a fight. He was solo. While Jimyo had over 10 goons on his side, he asks why he was the only one arrested. Jimyo's father just smirks and yells for Chief Kim, ordering him to haul Muyuk to interrogation. The chief hesitates, reminding him that Muyuk is just a minor. But Jimyo's father roars at him to just follow his orders, and the chief obeys, saying he'll take care of it himself. With a cold glint in his eye, Jimyo's father declares he knows the perfect way to deal with punks like Muyuk. Inside the interrogation room, he reveals that Muyuk's homeroom teacher from last year reported everything, labeling him as no different from a common gang member. He accuses Muyuk of violence, extortion, and theft, happening both in and out of school, and claims seeing what he did to his son is proof he is no ordinary delinquent. In his thoughts, Muyuk recognizes Jimyo's dad as that same sick animal abuser. He states firmly that he was only defending himself, sure that if he hadn't, he would have been the one seriously hurt. Jimyo's father sneers, repeating his claim of self-defense, and demands a straight answer. Muyuk explains he heard his friend was dragged away, so he went to investigate. But Jimyo and his crew ambushed him, leaving him no choice but to fight back. He then asks if defending himself was really so wrong. Unsatisfied, Jimyo's father snatches a belt, declaring this won't cut it. He needs to teach Muyuk a lesson. He orders the officers to restrain Muyuk. Muyuk repeats the truth, saying Jimyo was even armed with a knife. Jimyo's father curses, saying Muyuk is forcing him to go back to his old ways, and tells the officers to tie him to the chair. The officers are hesitant, but comply when Jimyo's father screams at them furiously. They tie Muyuk to the chair as Jimyo's father reveals a needle, warning him not to blame anyone else for what comes next. As he grabs Muyuk's finger, ready to use the needle, Muyuk suddenly bursts into laughter. Taken aback, Jio's father demands to know why he's laughing. Muyuk taunts him, calling both father and son cowards who can't fight one-on-one and hide behind toys. Furious, Jio's father screams for the officers to restrain Muyuk. But just then, Chief Kim enters the room. Irritated, Jio's father tells him to mind his own business. The chief warns of a huge problem, urging him to see their guest, the chief prosecutor of the Busan District Public Prosecutor's Office. Yu Chang-ho steps inside. Jio's father, today, stunned, demands to know why he's here. Yoon Chang-ho cracks a hard slap across his face, grabs his collar, and roars at him for messing with a minor. He yells that this isn't the Fifth Republic and calls him nuts for causing a scene in Busan, right when his own transfer is coming up. Stunned, Jio's father stammers, asking why the chief prosecutor is doing this. Yoon Chang-ho sneers, asking if he has any idea whose grandson Muyuk is. Baffled, Jio's father says he doesn't. Yoon Chang-ho reveals the kid is the grandson of Chairman Chien of Pyeongchang-dong. Jio's father goes pale with terror. He stutters the chairman's name, the weight of his screw-up crashing down. With a chilling smirk, Kim Muyuk gives him a look and a smug wink. Later, at the dinner table, Muyuk and his grandpa, Chetan Tazin, sat in a tense, heavy silence. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Chetan Tazin's sharp gaze was locked on his grandson as he finally broke the stillness. He grilled Muyuk with a sharp tone, demanding to know why he was being so quiet. He pushed him to speak up, to explain how he got into this complicated mess. Without a single moment's pause, Muyuk answered resolutely in his head. He'd only called his grandfather because that prosecutor tried to rig the whole game, abusing his power to control the investigation. It was a dirty fight from the very start. His grandfather, eyes narrowed, questioned if this whole disaster couldn't have been avoided entirely. Muyuk's answer came with sharp clarity. If they had only been targeting him, he would have just endured it quietly. But they went after the people around him, his friends, his own family. They dragged innocent people into their dirty plot just to trap him. Since he couldn't escape it, he chose to face it head on. He saw no other option. Completely crushing his foes was the only way to make sure they'd never bother him again. Deep down, he had an unshakable resolve to protect the people he loved, no matter what it took. Though he already owed his grandfather a massive debt, he swore to himself he would do absolutely anything, pay any price necessary to shield his family and friends from harm. Chetan Tazin's sharp question came next, cutting straight to the core of the issue. He asked what Muyuk would have done if he had not stepped in to help. If, in that crucial moment, he had just stood by. Muyuk considered it. If that had been the case, it would have meant their bond as family, their bloodline, was meaningless. He figured that if his grandfather, with all his influence, had abandoned him when he could have easily helped, then, in his heart, he would no longer be his grandfather. Hearing this, Chetan Tazin erupted into a hearty laugh. A deep, booming sound that completely filled the entire room. He smirked at Muyuk's resolve, agreeing wholeheartedly. To land a hit, a man must never back down. He should use every weapon at his disposal without a second thought. As his grandpa laughed, Muyuk couldn't help but think to himself, though he'd spoken with total sincerity, he realized this was his grandfather's lifelong philosophy. A harsh truth he had learned the hard way in his past life. Shin Tae-soon's face turned grim again. He reminded Muyuk of a key rule. If a foe is unavoidable, you must utterly crush them. Half-baked victories and foolish mercy just give your enemies another chance to strike you down. He warned Muyuk to burn this lesson into his mind. If a man wants to turn someone into an ally, he must embrace them with everything he's got. But if that's impossible, he must rip them out by the roots. Completely. Getting down to business, Shin Tae-soon called to Director Ha, Asking about the current situation in Busan, Director Ha reported instantly. Prosecutor Hong is now under internal audit. His years of corruption finally caught up, including bribery, torture, and fixing cases from his time in the SU Public Division. His arrest was certain. Moreover, Chief Prosecutor Yoon Chung-ho was awaiting Shin Tae-soon's final judgment. Shin Tae-soon's gaze sharpened as he asked about the school. Director Ha continued his report. Prosecutor Hong's son, the one who started all the chaos, has been expelled. All students in the scandal dropped out on their own, even last year's homeroom teacher, who gave a biased testimony against Muyuk, is now locked up behind bars. His corruption was so flagrant. The arrest warrant was issued in a flash. Shin Tae-soon turned to Muyuk, his voice heavy with finality. He asked if this result was enough to satisfy him, but Muyuk's mission wasn't fulfilled yet. One final request still lingered in his heart. His grandfather, without a second thought, gave him permission to speak. Muyuk boldly stated his wish to personally handle Chief Prosecutor Yoon. Shin Tae-soon, surprised for a moment, asked why he wanted to take on this burden all by himself. The scene cuts to a quiet private room where Director Ha sat across from Chief Prosecutor Yoon. The tension was palpable as the director asked about Prosecutor Hong's ultimate fate. Prosecutor Yoon replied with steely resolve. Prosecutor Hong is already cuffed and facing heavy charges. Determined to make an example of him, Yoon insisted that through this whole process, Kim Muyuk's name must stay completely clean and unmentioned. Director Ha reassured him, confirming they were on the same page. Then, he told Yoon someone was here to see him. With that, he slid open the door. Standing there, waiting calmly, was Kim Muyuk. As Muyuk entered, Chief Prosecutor Yoon greeted him, regret weighing down his very soul. He sincerely apologized for everything that happened. Admitting his own failure, he vowed that as long as he was the Chief Prosecutor of Busan, an injustice like this would never happen again. Muyuk, with calm grace, thought to himself. Realizing Yoon had been totally powerless against such overwhelming pressure, he was glad his grandpa wasn't one to hold a grudge. Even so, Yoon felt a knot of worry tighten in his gut. He feared she and Taizan, Muyuk's grandfather, wouldn't just let this slight slide. With a firm resolve, Muyuk gave a deep, respectful bow to Yoon, laying his thoughts bare. This was why he'd insisted on meeting face to face. The chief prosecutor took a hit because of him, so Muyuk had to apologize personally. A stunned Yoon was floored by Muyuk's sincerity and quickly shook his head. No. He was the one who should be bowing and scraping for forgiveness. His inability to control his own men caused this whole mess. Muyuk, relieved by Yoon's words, thought he just needed to deliver this same earnest apology to his grandfather. The question was, how? Steeling himself, he made a quiet but heavy request of the prosecutor. Yoon, intrigued, asked what he wanted. Muyuk requested one future favor. Completely unconditional. Yoon raised an eyebrow, asking for details. Muyuk swore it would be a favor that would never bring Yoon harm, and something only he could do when the moment was right. A chuckle escaped Yoon's lips as he agreed. If it was within his power, he would gladly do it. Muyuk thanked him sincerely, vowing to tell his grandfather about their talk. This would clear Yoon of any lingering blame for the incident. Pure relief washed over the chief prosecutor as he nodded, the immense weight on his shoulders finally lifting. Muyuk hoped their next meeting would be on better terms. He noted Yoon's promotion to SU was coming soon, which earned a hopeful response from the prosecutor. With a courteous goodbye, Muyuk turned to go. He mentally sighed, remembering he had to be back at school tomorrow, after missing a bunch of days thanks to this whole mess. Yoon recalled Muyuk was just a student and let out a chuckle, hoping to see him again. As the young man walked away, Yoon was completely lost in thought. He couldn't believe how masterfully that kid handled such a tangled mess. For a kid his age, Muyuk had an insane talent for navigating these dangerous political games. 3 years flew by. At last, the day of the university entrance exam had finally arrived. The year 1993. The exam hall. One last academic proficiency test. This was its final run before the new college scholastic ability test took over, and Kim Muyuk was there to ace that final academic proficiency test, marking an era's end. On results day, a director told Chairman Taizan he'd pulled strings with a professor to check Muyuk's scores for Korean University. Hearing this, Chairman Taizan casually asked if the boy had even passed, but the moment he saw the score, his jaw dropped in utter disbelief. At the same time, at the results venue, a swarm of reporters had cornered Kim Muyuk, buzzing about his first-place finish on the university entrance exam. Muyuk stood there, unflustered, smirking internally. A perfect score of 340 points on the last proficiency test. A new record. The reporters swarmed him with questions. How could a tech high school kid do this? They demanded to know the secret behind his unbelievable success. They whispered. Did he get secret tutoring? But Muyuk coolly denied it, saying he never had a tutor or went to some fancy academy. He had relied on nothing but the official textbooks. A reporter pushed forward, asking for a message to next year's hopefuls. Muyuk, flashing a killer smile, paused for a beat, then dropped his bombshell with total ease. He said that studying is actually the simplest thing in the world. Meanwhile, at home, Chi and Taunan were still staring at the god-tier score, unable to hide his pride, roaring with laughter and booming that this was his grandson. At Mangu's father's club, Mangu and Kongsung were partying hard. Mangu and Kungan threw their glasses up, yelling their heads off in excitement, toasting to a friendship they swore would last for all time. Kim Muyuk watched, cringing at their racket, and asked why they were screaming like that. He shot them a look to keep it down, finding their energy way over the top. But Mangu, buzzing, shot back that, after 3 hard years of studying, they'd earned the right to go wild. Since it was his dad's club, he bragged that the drinks and the room were all on him. He proudly brandished a pricey bottle of whiskey, declaring it was exclusively for them. Kim Muyuk recalled his past life, where he downed every spirit imaginable. From soju to whiskeys worth tens of millions of won a bottle, he agreed, deciding they might as well get wasted today. Inside his head, he mused, it had been a while. He was curious how the first whiskey of this new life would hit. He raised the glass and took a sip, but his palate instantly screamed that something was wrong. The taste was off. A dark thought crossed his mind. Is this fake? Mangu, feeling the burn, eagerly asked. How's the whiskey killer stuff? Right, Muyuk just shrugged. It's not bad. Kinda like drinking water. Hiding his letdown. Internally, however, he decided, it's Mangu's dad's club, so I'll just fake it and take tiny sips. Just then, some young punk swaggered over, with 3 ladies in tow. He shouted to Mangu, gesturing at the absolute stunner of the group, and told him to treat her right. The second they saw her, both Mangu and Hung were totally mesmerized by her beauty, so they all started drinking. The gorgeous woman turned to Muyuk, noting his young face, and asked him for his age, adding that she was 21. Mangu jumped in, blurting out they were 20 and just got into college a few days back. Intrigued, the woman asked what university they got into. But before Mangu could puff out his chest and answer, Muyuk slapped a hand over his mouth, saying it was just some small school on the edge of Seoul. Right at that moment, Mr. Behan stormed in with his posse. His eyes locked onto the woman in green, and he marched right up to her, demanding to know what the hell she was doing. He snarled that he'd been wondering where she went after the bathroom, only to find her with these kids, rolling her eyes. The woman in green sighed that she seriously couldn't come to this club anymore, muttering that the clientele had gone downhill. Mr. Behan's face darkened. What did you just say to me? She shot back that she bounced from his room without a single drink, making it clear she wasn't interested. She laid into him, telling him to quit, calling him an ugly wild boar who had absolutely no sense. Mr. Bon, his rage boiling, warned her. Are you done yet? Kim Muyuk realized he was getting dragged into some pointless drama. He figured their best bet was to just bail, and told everyone it was time for them to go. But Mangu, irritated, cursed under his breath at Mr. Bon, provoked. Mr. Bon demanded to know what he'd said, seeing the situation getting worse. Mew turned to Mangu, reminding him he was drunk and not thinking right. He pushed him to get out of there now. Mangu, totally sloshed, slurred. What did I say something wrong? He grumbled. They were just drinking when Mr. Bon crashed their party, figuring it was better to just leave. Mangu told the crew they had to go before they wrecked his dad's business. But just as they began to walk away, Mr. Bon blocked them, demanding, Where do you punks think you're going? He hurled insults and chucked a beer bottle right at them, but luckily, it missed everyone. A waiter quickly intervened, pleading with Mr. Bon to forgive them. He explained they were the boss's son and his friends, who'd had too much celebrating their graduation. He begged Mr. Bon to just let it go. But Mr. Bon shoved the waiter aside and started wailing on him, furious for being told what to do. At the sight of the violence, the whole club's crowd scattered in fear. Just then, Mangu's father arrived and tried to de-escalate the whole situation. He asked Mr. Bon Bon why he was acting up again and told him to stop. Mr. Bon. Seething. Reminded Mr. Lee, they took Na Dong and settled things with Mr. Daughter. Bayan supplying the booze. He accused Mr. Side Lee of dissing him, despite their long-standing relationship, watching quietly. Muyuk realized this was the dude who was selling that fake whiskey. Mr. Lee tried to cool things down, admitting his son was still young and had probably caused some trouble. He apologized and asked Mr. Bon to calm down, promising he would handle everything himself. He rushed the young men out and told Mongu to go straight home. Muyuk also urged Mongu to leave. But Mr. Bon interrupted, refusing to let them go. He declared he'd teach them all a lesson before they could even leave. Mr. Lee pleaded again for the kids to leave, offering to settle it between the adults. Without any warning, Mr. Bon slapped Mr. Lee hard across the face. He claimed he'd respected Mr. Lee this whole time, because he was older, but now Mr. Lee had crossed the line. Mr. Bon kicked Mr. Lee, sending him sprawling down to the ground. Seeing this, Mongu exploded with rage and threw a punch at Mr. Bon. But Mr. Bon dodged the wild attack, knocked Mangu down, and grabbed him by his hair. He sneered he'd teach Mongsu a harsh lesson on messing with people you don't know. Mr. Lee, desperate, begged Mr. Bon to let his son go and to punish him instead, mocking their father-son moment. Mr. Bon faked being touched and agreed, saying he'd hit Mr. Lee instead, just as he raised his hand for another slap. Kim Muyuk grabbed his wrist and told him that this was enough. He told Mr. Bon that no matter how mad he was, you don't hit a father in front of his son. Mr. Bon just scoffed, wondering if kids these days had any guts. He threw a punch at Muyuk, who dodged it with slick ease. Suddenly, one of Mr. Bon's goons just collapsed at his feet. Shocked, Mr. Bon spun to see who dared to strike. The next instant, Mr. Bon himself ate a heavy fist. As the camera's view shifted around, it revealed the person who delivered the hit. It was Park Donggu. Mr. Bon staggered up, facing off with Park Donggu. Donggu eyed him coldly, wondering how this relic wasn't locked up yet. He saw Mr. Bon as a quiet-type thug, the kind even the cops would probably ignore. Mr. Bon, catching his wind, declared this was his turf now, but Donggu was unimpressed. Na Dong was never Mr. Bon's turf. And now that the real owner was here, he ordered the old man to scram before it got messy. Then, Donggu saw Kim Muyuk, greeting him by the name Kang Momo gave him. He said it's been a long time and that it was damn good to see his face again. He asked Muyuk to grab some soju with him. The two sat, sharing drinks and stories. Donggu said he saw the news, surprised that Muyuk was now the top dog in the country. He admitted he'd always thought Muyuk was an oddball, but he never figured he was this much of a genius. Muyuk then asked when Donggu came back. Donggu said he'd been back a bit, but had been quietly and sneakily taking back his old stomping grounds. Intrigued, Muyuk asked if this was Donggu's old turf. Donggu confirmed it, saying the whole strip from Nonong to Bosong and Yando was his. He thought taking it back would be a hassle, but with everyone nabbed, there were no real fights to be had. The assassin crew he used to run with had been completely and utterly dismantled. He admitted that if Muyuk hadn't tipped him off, he'd be rotting in a cell. That warning was his saving grace. A video. So now, he asked Muyuk how he could pay him back. Confused, Muyuk just replied, asking what he meant by that. Donggu insisted, saying Muyuk saved his life, and he couldn't live with a debt like that hanging over his head. He had to repay the favor. Muyuk then asked how long it'd take Donggu to get the whole Busan area under his thumb. Donggu, a bit puzzled, asked why Muyuk was talking about his business instead of answering the question. But Muyuk clarified that this was exactly what he wanted right now. Donggu figured about half a year. Best case, or about a year if it dragged. Since all the big fish were already caught, only the small fry were left to clean up. Muyuk approved, telling Donggu to take over Busan, and to do it quick. He told him to grease the palms of the cops and prosecutors, handle it all with extreme care, and most of all, never, ever get caught. He warned Donggu to avoid certain merchandise, and to expect a crackdown of epic proportions. Even with strong connections, it'd be tough to get out of. Meanwhile, Muyuk told him to prep for a slow move into the light. Donggu let out a slight smirk at the idea of stepping into the daylight. He believed that guys like them could never truly live in the sun. If he did, another shark like him would just rise from the depths. and it'd be war again. Muyuk said that it was just a facade. Arged. If they had to follow every single law, then what's the point of being gangsters anyway? He stressed that the Su gangs were now corporatizing, and Buin needed to get a move on. Otherwise, the gangs from Su would take over everything. He told Dong Su to hire slick lawyers and start the corporate shift immediately. Once he had total control of Busan, he should march on Seoul. Dong Su, stunned by the sheer ambition, asked if Muyuk seriously thought it was that simple. He reminded him Su was a war zone where national brawlers clashed, but Muyuk just grinned, telling him not to sweat it. He vowed to back him up, telling Dong Su to trust him and get ready. Donggu thought the plan was insane, yet strangely persuasive. He agreed, musing that it wasn't a bad idea. Fired up, he roared, "Their new target." Sol Muyuk nodded, but said there was a catch. Donggu asked what he meant by a catch. Muyuk laid it out plainly. His name, his identity, it all stays secret. No exceptions. No link between him and Donggu. In his thoughts, Muyuk mused that nobody could discover his existence yet. Not until he was prepared to take on the Chin family. Cut to Qian Zan's estate, where he's staring at his grandson's newspaper photo. A massive grin splits his face. His pride is obvious. Director Ha, standing by, sees this and asks if he's really that thrilled. Qian is bursting with pride. He thinks to himself, and why wouldn't I be? Someone from his bloodline got into a top-tier Korean university's law school. But his own grandson had also ranked as the top scorer in the entire nation. He fondly recalls the immense satisfaction from his earlier phone call with that old man from the Samsung Group. Qian knew how those types used to mock his family, calling them uneducated despite all their cash. They were always bragging about their kids going to elite universities and studying abroad. The director points out, those same people now come begging Qian for loans. The chairman just smirks. He knows they secretly despise him. But when they're desperate, they come crawling, waiting hours just for a meeting. He then reflects on his own tough past, recalling how he dropped out of elementary school, forced to work just to survive. His own kids weren't exactly scholars either. If not for his money, not a single one of them would have ever stepped foot inside a university. Director Han brings up his second daughter, Ms. Zhu, who got in Korean university as second best last year. Back then, Qian had gifted her a 15% share of Samsung Electronics. Qian agradece, acknowledging Jisu's intelligence, but confesses a special fondness for this boy, Muyuk. He muses how perfect it'd be if Muyuk wasn't just his grandson, but a true heir with the Qian name. Qian then changes the subject, asking for news on the president-elect. Director Ha informs him the president-elect is still meticulously choosing his transition committee members, but Qian faction has already secured 2 spots. Surprised, Qian asks if it's really 2 seats. Director Ha explains that, because this is a joint government and civilian administration, asking for more would be greedy. Xianta-san got it instantly. No further explanation needed. He mulled it over. Which positions would be the most strategic? Director Ha suggests they snag the Chief of Economic Affairs and the Chief of Political Affairs. Xianta-san questions the Political Affairs post, but the director reveals it controls the cops and prosecutors, making it a critical power play. Xianta-san agreed with the strategy, confirming these appointments go straight to the Blue House, which the director affirmed. Xianta-san then asked about Suhan and Sumin, wanting to know what they were currently plotting. Director Ha reports the second boss seems to be prepping a new business venture, but then he hesitates, sensing something was off. Xianta-san pushed him. Director Ha admitted the venture seemed linked to some gangsters. Xianta-san was stunned, remembering most gangs were wiped out during the big war on crime. Director reveals this one gang has been secretly growing with protection. Xianta-san's whole expression darkens when he hears the Azure Wind Society. He can't wrap his head around why his family is involved with them. Director Ha explains the business is tied to slot machines. Xianta-san scoffs, unimpressed that gambling was the best scheme they could hatch. Director Ha adds that Assemblyman Kim, the second boss's father-in-law, was paid off to handle the licensing. Assemblyman Kim has already raked in some serious political funds. Xianta-san, obviously ticked off, mutters that Assemblyman Kim is just running petty errands for his in-laws. He recalls warning his family time and again to avoid the Azure Wind Society. The director asks if they should act, but Xianta-san decides against it for now. He tells Director Ha to just keep a close watch on them to prevent any more trouble. Director Ha acknowledges the command. As silence falls, Xianta-san reflects on this grimly. He blames himself for borrowing power from the Azure Wind Society in his youth. He knows this is his karma, and resolves that before he dies, he will shatter this chain of ill fate, whatever it takes. In the next scene, we see Muyuk arrive at his grandpa's house. And the moment his grandfather saw him, his face beamed with joy. He'd been waiting eagerly for Muyuk. They both sat on the sofa and began to chat. His grandfather asked if Muyuk found a place to live in Suwon. He offered to get him an apartment or an office near his college. He insisted Muyuk just tell him wherever he wanted to stay. He even promised to hire a housekeeper for him so Muyuk could focus entirely on studying. Muyuk replied that, if it was okay, he'd rather stay right there at his grandfather's house. His grandfather, surprised, asked him to confirm. Muyuk explained that ever since he first laid eyes on this house, he had always dreamed of living here. His mother lived here when she was young, and by staying in this house, he felt he could be closer to her. He also said he wanted to see his grandfather more often. Hearing this, his grandfather chuckled warmly. He teased Muyuk, saying he's quite good at saying things that'll please an old man like him. With a satisfied smile, he told Muyuk to do as he pleased. In his mind, Muyuk thought back to his previous life. He used to only visit this mansion when his grandfather deigned to call. He was never invited to family gatherings, treated like an outcast, basically a servant to the family. But things were different now. By getting into Korea University Law School as a top student, he had suddenly become his grandfather's greatest pride. Naturally, his grandfather was treating him differently. He then eagerly pressed him about the special gift he wanted. He reminded Muyuk he'd upheld his end of the bargain from 3 years ago by getting into Korea University Law. Now, he demanded to know what Muyuk wanted as his prize. With a slight smirk, Muyuk remarked his grandfather must be dying of curiosity. To have summoned him right after the graduation ceremony, the old man didn't even deny it. He said he had been truly curious, as getting into a top law school or a perfect score on the college exam isn't something anyone can accomplish easily. He wondered what amazing prize Muyuk wanted to have studied so hard for. Urgently, he demanded to know his wish. Muyuk finally revealed his desire to learn the old man's business. His grandfather and the director beside him were both stunned into silence. His grandfather asked him if he really meant it. Muyuk confirmed it without a second thought. His grandfather pressed on, asking if he knew what his business was really about. The private money lending business. Muyuk acknowledged that he knew it was more than just lending and collecting money. He admitted to not knowing the details, but he knew for certain that his grandfather's work was far from normal, and that was precisely why he had to learn. In his mind, Muyuk had already weighed this decision heavily. He considered what was needed to seize the old man's wealth and enact his revenge on the Chien brothers. He weighed his options: money, manpower, teamed real estate, or stocks that were guaranteed to soar in value. He knew with his future knowledge, raking in cash via stocks, real estate, or commodities would be easy, or foreign exchange wouldn't be a challenge. However, he knew that if he accumulated wealth that way, it would eventually come to light. His uncles, Shins, Sumin, and Shisadin, would definitely try to put him in his place. At this point, he didn't have the power to defend himself. What he really needed was a secret stash of cash, funds that no one else knew about, to use against his uncles when the time was right. Kim Muyuk then firmly stated that if his grandfather wished for a lawyer, he'd follow that path without hesitation. He declared he was ready to take the bar exam at a moment's notice. Hearing this, she and Tazin scoffed at Muyuk's arrogance, remarking that he spoke of the bar exam as if it would be handed to him on a silver platter. The director silently watched Muyuk, her thoughts revealing her shock. She wondered if this young man had far greater abilities than she had first imagined, finding him truly unpredictable. Tazin then gave his consent, telling Muyuk he could go ahead and give it a try. He instructed the director to have Muyuk start by helping with her work. The director accepted the chairman's order without hesitation. In the next scene, Muyuk and the director are in her office, discussing the true nature of the business. The director explained the chairman was a kingpin in the loan game. To be blunt, it was hardcore private lending, or money lending, if you're nice, but these private loans had to play by the book, you see. And so, knowing the law was vital since the sums were insane and you needed absolutely foolproof collateral. She specified collateral could be real estate, various bonds, and even company stocks. But stocks were a risky bet, accepted cautiously due to their wild swings and effect on a company's shares. She revealed the chairman personally handled the big-shot conglomerates, especially for urgent cash or sums too huge for banks. The scale of these loans, we're talking tens to hundreds of billions in a single day. Muyuk said. Heh. The major banks back then were still finding their footing. Private lenders in Myeongdong like his gramps were the real kings of the financial world. The director kept drilling it in. He must master the opening talks between the chairman and the domestic conglomerates. For this, Muyuk had to learn to decipher ledgers and collateral laws. She then dumped a mountain of ledgers and contracts on him, plus legal docs for their current collateral. His mission: master it all in 3 days and give her the key points. Irritated, Muyuk thought to himself. I've already mastered all this information. Still, maybe he should at least pretend to study hard. Just for the sake of appearances. 1 week later, Chairman Tazin asked the director for her assessment of Muyuk after she had trained him. The director reported Muyuk had a freakish talent for the flow of money and could spot hidden plays in the documents. Skills like that take years to develop. Yet Muyuk absorbed it all instantly. Almost like he was born with the knowledge, she and Tazin shared a look of mild shock. The director added that when they met with corporate suits, Muyuk was perfectly composed and natural, not needing any of her support whatsoever. Tazin gave a quiet nod. The director added she believed Muyuk could learn all her practical tasks in just a few days. Tazin then asked if Muyuk could be put in charge of the Myeongdong operations. The director hesitated. Isn't it too soon? Will the heads of Myeongdong even acknowledge him? Chairman Tazin scoffed at her concern, saying he was giving Muyuk his own authority. He had absolutely no need for their acknowledgement. Director H noted that even Presidents Chian Soo-min and Shiu Hin found it tough to handle those guys. Doubting the young master could, Tazin firmly replied that Muyuk had to face them eventually, and it was better to throw him in the fire sooner than later. He ordered Director H to visit the Myeongdong heads and seize all their bank books. Director H accepted without a word. Chairman Tazin concluded. We'll soon find out if this kid is actually of any real use to us. Elsewhere, upon hearing Muyuk was heading to Myeongdong, Shinsum was absolutely stunned. Inwardly, he wondered what his father was scheming with this young brat. The scene shifted as Muyuk and Director H set out from Myeongdong. On the way, Muyuk pressed Director Ho about their business in Myeongdong. Director Ho revealed Myeongdong was the very heart of Korea's loan shark scene. He laid it out the HQs of the 5 major banks were clustered here, so the private loan market naturally sprouted up right beside them. Director Ho continued, explaining that while the chairman of huge conglomerates oversaw the massive operations, figures like Mr. Chi Soo-min and Chian Soo-hen pulled the strings on many other businesses, big and small. Apart from these two, there were 4 legends known as the 4 bosses of Myeongdong. Their scale wasn't the chairman's, but still, they were still the top loan sharks around, moving tens to hundreds of millions of won every single day. The chairman backed them as an investor. So Muyuk's mission was to see if they were playing straight with the cash. And yet, the director warned these bosses were old-school players in Myeongdong's loan game and total hard-asses. Muyuk just smirked, thinking it'd be better to clash with these types early and absorb everything. In his mind, he pictured the 4 loan shark bosses of Myeongdong. He remembered that back then, the loan shark world was full of monsters that even gangsters were terrified of. These 4 had ruled their turf for over a decade, earning them his grandfather's complete trust. Muyuk knew they were tough nuts to crack, but he'd grown up in this exact jungle in his past life, and had even stared death in the face. He was more than ready for what was coming. Before long, they hit the Myeongdong office, where one of the 4 bosses, Kim Hashik, greeted them warmly. Kim Hashik greeted Director Ha, saying it had been too long and he'd been waiting since he heard they were on their way. He asked about the chairman's health, and the director said he was fine, asking Kim Hashik how he'd been. Kim Hashik's eyes then locked onto Muyuk. Recognizing him, he checked with Director Ha that this was the chairman's grandson. Turning to Muyuk, he introduced himself. I'm Kim Hashik, and said it was a pleasure to finally meet him. He'd heard Muyuk got into Korea University, he said, then proudly added that he was a Korea University alum himself, playfully telling Muyuk to call him Sun Bae-nim. Muyuk responded, with due respect, calling him Sun Bae-nim and stating he looked forward to working with him. Inside, Muyuk sized him up an elite loan shark from Korea University. He had to admire it. Hashik had tossed aside a prestigious university degree that could have locked down a cushy career, just to dive into this brutal world. And in only 10 years, Kim Hashik had forged his own legend and cemented his place. Wasting no time, Muyuk asked for the ledgers first. Kim Hashik, slightly amused, remarked on just how eager Muyuk seemed to get started. He told him to relax, offering some tea first. Muyuk thought to himself that he wasn't used to this and it might take a while, so he pushed to start with the ledgers. At that, Kim Hashik finally slid over a stack of files, telling him to have at it. Muyuk thanked him, his eyes beginning to scan the documents carefully. Hashik offered coffee as he worked, saying there wasn't much to it. He confidently added that with his major in business administration, he was a master at managing the ledgers. As Muyuk flipped through the pages, he saw the ledger was too perfect. A sudden chill hit him. The Kim Hashik he knew was never this clean or meticulous. Muyuk said the ledger looked neat, and then asked Hashik to also hand over all the bank passbooks. Without a flinch, Hashik gave them to him. Muyuk saw there were 12 and Hashik confirmed it. Hashik stressed the passbooks were vital records, and that they never ever missed a single one. He assured they were organized daily, with no discrepancies. Not by a single cent. Muyuk acknowledged the effort, saying he'd take the documents. Stunned, Hashik challenged him. Muyuk explained the chairman's orders were to collect all pseudonym bank books managed by Hashik. He then asked if there was an issue. Stunned, Hashik repeated the chairman's order in disbelief. Muyuk, who had totally expected this reaction, thought to himself, asterisk bingo. That confirms it. Asterisk Hashik had definitely been messing with the bank books. Hashik stammered, trying to reason with him. Even so, how could Muyuk just come and take them all like this? He asked if this was truly the chairman's command. Calmly, Muyuk asked, why would I lie? He told Hashik to call Pyondong right now if he doubted him. He pushed harder, asking if there was a reason he couldn't take the books. If so, now's the time to talk. Muyuk added that he didn't want to get rough on their first meeting. Flustered, Hashik denied it all. He insisted it wasn't a problem, just that the whole request was so sudden. Then Muyuk told him he needed to speak with him alone. Hashik's goons were still standing by, but the director barked for them to leave. Reminding them, the young master asked for a private chat. In response, Hashik smacked one of his guys and roared at him to get lost, saying he and the young master would talk. The three men finally exited the room, lighting a smoke. Hashik told Muyuk not to mind those guys, calling them useless bastards. Suddenly, Muyuk got right in his face and declared firmly that from this point on, Hashik was just a lackey and he should start acting like one. He pointed out the obvious, asking if Hashik couldn't read the sign on the leader's house, then announced that he was the new leader. Now enraged, Hashik roared at him, warning him not to cross the line. Muyuk roared back, ordering Hashik to sit down. His shout was so powerful, but it never reached the ears of Director Ha and the other men outside. The director then remembered Muyuk's clear instruction that no matter how loud he got during their private conversation, absolutely no one was to enter the room. Inside, Muyuk grilled Hashik harshly, telling him to drop the tough guy act and listen up. He revealed that he knew Hashik had been cooking the numbers on the passbooks. Muyuk admitted he understood Hashik and his men needed to make a living, and that he could overlook some things. But messing with the chairman's secret slush fund was a fatal mistake. He confronted him head-on, demanding to know why he hadn't coughed up the chairman's secret bank book. Hashik froze, pure terror painting his face. His mind screamed, how could Muyuk know that secret account was only known to him and the chairman? Seeing that look, Muyuk smirked. He thought to himself, hook, line, and sinker. Got him. Muyuk's glare, sharp as a blade, bored into Kim Hashik as he pressed his advantage. He demanded, his voice heavy with power, to know about the secret bank books. He stated that his grandfather gave them to the top dogs of Myeongdong, and that Kim Hashik was sitting on one of them. Without any hesitation, he ordered Hashik to bring him the book immediately. In that instant, a heavy truth echoed in Muyuk's mind. He remembered his grandfather secretly setting up 4 bank books, all under phony names, giving one to each of Myeongdong's 4 head loan sharks. These accounts were fakes, for people who never even existed. Each one's holding a crazy 1 trillion won, for a grand total of 4 trillion won. Muyuk thought deeply, recalling how he'd first found these hidden accounts while digging into his grandfather's secret assets after his death. However, just before he could get his hands on them, the Financial Real Name Act of August 1993 hit. By then, the huge fortune had been cleaned out. Kim Hashik, who was secretly draining the funds, must have been thrilled they were unchecked. Muyuk stared coldly at Hashik and saw the flicker of fear in his eyes. Without softening his tone, he questioned the man's silence, asking why he looked so shocked. Did he honestly believe Muyuk wouldn't find out inside? Kim Hashik's mind was in chaos. He couldn't believe Muyuk somehow knew about the secret bank book, a truth only he and the late chairman were supposed to share. Could the chairman have actually told his own grandson? Muyuk, done waiting, told Hashik to hurry up and bring the bank book now. But Hashik still hesitated, nervously asking for more time. As Hashik begged for time, Muyuk's face went cold. He repeated the word, time, his voice dripping with utter disdain. He asked if this was really something that required any time. He gave a final ultimatum. If Hashik didn't bring the bank book within 10 minutes, he would be forced to report it all straight to the chairman. Panic filled Hashik's voice as he begged for 1 month. He pleaded with total desperation, asking for a favor, his voice cracking. Muyuk smirked at Hashik's pathetic request, remarking, so this is how you ask for favors. He shot down the month instantly, telling Hashik he had only 2 weeks to get it all. Not a single cent better be missing from the account. he warned with a dark look. He added grimly that their conversation and everything that happened between them had to remain a secret. No one else is to know what we discussed here. With a cold, sure smile, Muyuk said there were no issues with the leader and the books. He stated he would return in 2 weeks to collect everything. With that final declaration, he turned on his heel and strode out of the room. The moment he stepped out, 3 of Hashik's men, who were lying in wait, shot up to block his path. Their eyes were sharp, full of menace. Their stance screamed they'd jump him right here. But before they could act, Director Ha's voice boomed, a thunderous command, ordering them to stand down. He reminded them sharply they were facing the young master and to show some damn respect. Grudgingly, the goons backed off, letting Muyuk and the director pass. The moment they were gone, the 3 couldn't help but grill Kim Hashik. They whispered with a hint of panic, realizing that kid they just faced was no ordinary brat. He was a monster, far stronger than they'd imagined, not one to be trifled with. Later, Chin Tazin, Muyuk's grandfather, sat with Director Ha, inquiring if the young master had crushed his assigned task. Director Ha respectfully reported that Muyuk had completely torn through the ledgers and snagged all 12 banks that were registered under phony names. He added that Muyuk also plans to demand reports from the bosses every 2 weeks from now on. A pleased Tazin asked if there was any other trouble between Muyuk and Hashik. Director Ha explained that at first, Kim Hashik treated the young master like dirt, a mere subordinate. But after their private chat, it was obvious that Muyuk had gained the upper hand, leaving the room radiating pure confidence. Tazin then asked who Muyuk planned to visit next. The reply: the next target is Mr. No Eon. Pleased with the progress, Chin Tazin told Director Ha to take a well-earned rest. After that, Chin Tazin himself made a call to Kim Hashik. He asked about Muyuk and how their little meeting went. Kim Hashik was dead silent, at a total loss for words. Chin Tazin, his patience wearing thin, ordered him to speak. At last, Hashik cracked, confessing that more than Suhan or Sumin, it was the chairman's own grandson, Muyuk, who was the spitting image of Chin Tazin. Intrigued, Chin Tazin asked what they discussed in private. And yet again, Hashik faltered, hesitating to answer. Chin Tazin's voice turned to ice as he warned Hashik not to make him ask a second time. He demanded to know what the hell was said between them. Reluctantly, Kim Hashik admitted Muyuk brought up the secret bank account. An account that Chin Tazin had once entrusted solely to his care. An account that was meant to stay buried from everyone. Chin Tazin was visibly shaken by this shocking revelation. He wondered aloud how the hell Muyuk could have possibly found out about the secret account. Hashik then said Muyuk gave him 2 weeks to hand over the bankbook, and nervously asked if he should just obey. Chin Tazin gave his permission, telling Hashik to hand over the bankbook. Then he recalled a rumor that Hashik had dared to raise his voice at his grandson. Hashik immediately groveled, deeply sorry, and swore that such a grievous error would never happen again. Chin Tazin coldly reminded Hashik that no matter how rich a dog gets, he can never sit on his master's throne. He warned him not to forget the only reason why he even has his position. He made it crystal clear that such disrespect would not be tolerated again. And with those final, chilling words, he hung up, left alone with his thoughts. Chin Tazin wondered how Muyuk could have learned about the secret bank books. Not even Suhan and Sumin, his own right-hand man, knew nothing. He muttered, how could his grandson have possibly sniffed out such a deeply buried secret? Then he recalled Hosik's words, that Muyuk was just like him. The old man couldn't help but let out a chuckle, pride and curiosity glinting in his eyes. Meanwhile, Kim Muyuk lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with schemes. He had finally found Kim Hashik's critical weakness. The old man's flaw. A new path had opened up. One fraught with peril but also legendary opportunity. And a single burning question hit him hard. Were the other Myeongdong bosses also secretly cooking their books? His gut screamed that they absolutely were. The colossal 400 billion won, hidden away in dummy accounts. A fortune poised to evaporate once the real name financial system took effect. It could all be his for the taking. If he could just snatch it all without a single soul noticing, it'd be an unstoppable financial weapon. The ultimate trump card in his war against the ruthless Chin brothers. His mind raced, desperately trying to forge the perfect plan to grab the cash before the new system locked it down for good. He knew timing was everything. A single moment of hesitation would cost him it all. The next morning came, the crisp air sharpening his senses. Filled with resolve, Muyuk arranged a meeting with No Ilsu, one of the veteran Myeongdong bosses. He didn't waste a second. Muyuk informed him that he had already seized 12 banks and declared he would personally inspect the ledgers every 2 weeks. This would ensure total control of their finances. Then he asked, voice calm and steady, if No In-suk had any problems with this new deal. No In-suk, with cautious respect, replied he had no issues at all. His face a perfect mask of composure. Seizing the opening, Muyuk then casually, yet pointedly, asked if No In-suk had other bank books belonging to the chairman. At that question, No In-suk's face stiffened. A tiny flicker of tension betrayed his carefully hidden unease. Muyuk caught it in an instant. That fleeting reaction confirmed it. Kim Hashik hadn't told him the whole story. There were still deeper secrets hidden from him. No In-suk hesitated for a moment, then confessed in a low voice that only he and the chairman knew of a particular secret bankbook's existence. Muyuk leaned in a bit, his gaze unwavering, reassuring him with quiet confidence. He told No to put his trust in him and give him the hidden bank book. Trust, after all, was its own kind of currency in Myanmar. As he processed this new information, Muyuk's expression darkened. First Kim Hashik, and now No In-suk. It was becoming clearer that the money from the dummy accounts hadn't simply vanished with the implementation of the new system. No, it was highly likely all four of the Mayong bosses were secretly hoarding pieces of this fortune. These men, loan sharks who thrived under his grandfather's wing, were now stabbing their benefactor in the back for greed. Muyuk asked No In-suk if he needed time to get the hidden book. No In-suk, after a quick calculation, first asked for 2 weeks. But feeling Muyuk's silent pressure, he quickly changed his answer to just 1 week. Muyuk agreed, his voice cool and firm, telling him he'd be back in exactly 1 week. He promised he wouldn't tell his grandfather about what he had found out, but he left the bug with a chilling warning: never forget his grandfather. Chien Tasin was a being of absolute power, and should a dog ever bite its master, it would be mercilessly cast out and destroyed. Not wasting a single moment, Muya then went to see Shin Sunil, a legendary wrestling champ his grandpa had backed since he was a kid. Maybe it was this deep connection that made Sunil the most loyal and respectful of all the Mayang bosses. Unlike the rest, he had no hidden motives. Or so it appeared. Muyuk got straight to it, telling Shin Sunil he'd gone over the bank books and ledgers with a fine-tooth comb. Then he asked if Sunil held any other bank books for the chairman, hoping to erase any lingering suspicion. Sunil answered thoughtfully, wondering aloud if the chairman had sent Muya to collect these books as well. Without hesitation, he grabbed a hidden bank book, tucked safely behind a framed photo of Chien Tasin on the wall. He handed it over with a sense of duty and a quiet pride. As Muyuk accepted the bank book, a true flicker of respect crossed his mind. Shin Sunul hadn't embezzled a single coin, just as he'd thought. There was a damn good reason his grandfather had always placed his complete trust in this man. They exchanged respectful goodbyes, promising to meet again when the time was right. Muyuk's mission was far from over. He turned to Director Ha, saying there was still one boss left on the list to meet. A Mr. Yu Jiggang. Director Ha explained that Yu Jiggang was the most seasoned of them all, a man who'd seen the rise and fall of the Myeongdong loan market. Unlike the others mentored by Chien Tasin, Yu Jiggang was once his rival during the brutal wars of the 1970s. The director asked if Muyuk knew of Yu Jiggang's infamous nickname. Muyuk simply gave a nod. Yu Jiggang was a living legend in the underworld, a man who single-handedly smashed the gangs that tried to take over the Myeongdong loan market. He was known as the Hammer. Chairman Yu Jigang, a true force of nature in human form. Soon, they arrived at Yu Jigang's office, a humble but fortified den. Heavy with the weight of history, Director Ha called out. But Yu Jigang's gravelly voice just told them to wait. He claimed he was busy with important business. Director Ha went to reply, but Muyuk simply raised a hand, stopping him. They waited in silence, the tension in the room growing with each second. Finally, Yu Jigang made his appearance. He apologized for the wait, explaining he was meticulously cleaning the ledger to prepare for the chairman's report. He hoped they weren't too offended by the wait. A mischievous glint appeared in his eye. He started to mess with them, poking fun at their impatience while talking about his work. Muyuk just asked to see the ledger, but Yu Jigang wasn't finished. He kept mocking Director Ha, joking that he looked totally overworked, like a man burdened with changing diapers for a fussy little kid. He then laughed heartily, claiming the chairman was way too harsh on Director Ha, and questioning if he was really cut out for this job. Then, with a sly grin, he offered to take Muyuk under his own wing, saying that if the director couldn't handle it, he should just send Muyuk to him for proper training. From top to bottom, Director Ha warned Yu Jigang to watch his mouth. He reminded him Muyuk was the chairman's own grandson. But Yu Jin just scoffed, sneering that it didn't matter to him at all. He sneered that young master was plenty, then mocked Director Ha for his old-fashioned, bootlicking loyalty. He declared he had no time for such empty formalities, and then provocatively asked Muyuk if he even understood the numbers he was staring at. He said to just give it to Director Ha and stop wasting everyone's time. But Muyuk, keeping his cool, just told him to wait a bit longer. As he was almost finished with his little inspection, inwardly, Muyuk saw right through Yujigong's childish provocations, a pathetic attempt to get under his skin. The ledgers looked perfect. A little too perfect. Suspicious. But that wasn't the real prize anyway. What truly mattered was the hidden bank book. The key to it all. With steely resolve, Muyuk declared that the ledgers showed no issues at all, and then directly demanded Yujigong surrender the bank book. Yujigong's eyes narrowed. Asking why he should, Muyuk replied, "The chairman himself ordered me to collect it." At that, Yujigong just smirked, his voice dripping with defiance, saying if that's true, it'd be better for the chairman to come and get the bank book with his own two hands. That's the proper way. Isn't it? Asterisk young master times, he taunted. His words a clear and open challenge. Hearing this, Muyuk felt a jolt of shock ripple through him. But he held his ground, knowing the real battle had only just begun. At this, Director Ha finally snapped, his anger boiling over as he warned Yujigong that his jokes were going too far and to not cross the line. But Yujigong just smirked, his face a mask of pure mockery. "You really think this is a joke, Director?" he asked, reminding him that he never once treated his work lightly. He claimed he was just teaching the young master a thing or two about proper business protocol. He sarcastically asked why Director Ha hadn't bothered to do so himself. A sharp jab. He accused Director Ha of taking it too easy these days and demanded an answer. Director Ha's rage surged even higher at these blatant insults. But before he could erupt, Kim Muyuk stepped in with a disarming smile. He calmly asked Director Ha to step outside for a moment. Director Ha, confused, asked why the young master wanted him to step out. Kim Muyuk firmly told him, "Go outside and cool your head for a bit." Hearing that, Director Ha had no choice but to leave the room. Once Director Ha was gone, Kim Muyuk turned to Yujigong, his smile gone. "Hand over the bank book. Now." He also ordered him to give up the chairman's select accounts along with it. Yujigong scoffed at Muyuk's inside knowledge of the accounts. He remarked that the chairman must have been training him well. But then he just shrugged it off, reminding Muyuk that he'd already made it crystal clear the chairman himself would have to come collect the bank books. Muyuk's patience finally snapped. "Enough of this," he shouted at Yujigong. But Yujigong just roared right back. Furious that Muyuk dared to raise his voice at him, he reminded the kid that long before he was born, Yujigong was protecting the chairman, spending his days in Myeongdong, buying off armed goons with drinks and cleaning up all their dirty messes. He sneered that a punk like Muyuk had no right to hold his head high and talk back to a veteran like him. Yujigong roared that only the chairman himself could give him orders. Not even the chairman's own kids, the two presidents Chian, had the right. He sneered at Muyuk, asking who he was to boss him around, warning him that sharing the chairman's blood meant squat. He wasn't on Eugen's level. He was President Yu, he proudly declared. He hoisted his hammer with a smirk. He asked if Muyuk knew how many times this beast had saved his grandfather's entire empire. He bragged about all the thugs he had personally smashed and chased away with it. This hammer, he roared, was Mayang's history. The living proof of the loan shark game, with a deadly glare. He warned Muyuk not to mess with him, calling him a little punk. Kim Muyuk's gaze turned cold on Yujigong, asking if he really wanted to continue down this suicidal path. Without missing a beat, Yujigong shot back, asking if Muyuk even knew how things ended in this world. He scoffed at him, calling him a clueless brat and questioning if he really understood how things worked. Inside, Muyuk couldn't help but analyze. Even if Yujigong was just posturing, this was excessively hostile. Muyuk wondered what gave this guy the confidence to be so reckless. He was positive Yujigong couldn't actually rebel against his grandfather. A thought struck his mind. Was there something he didn't know about Yujong? A hidden ace? He showed none of his inner doubts. Muyuk coldly declared to Yujong that he had one day. He ordered him to have all the bank books prepared and ready within that time, stating he would be back tomorrow. He warned him that if this little show continued, he wouldn't be able to just let it slide anymore. As Muyuk turned to go, Yujigong yelled from behind, charging with his hammer raised high. But it was just a bluff, not a real strike. However, when Yujigong met Muyuk's eyes, he saw absolutely no fear. Stunned, Yujigong thought that the chairman's bloodline did have some guts. He had expected Muyuk to be enraged. Instead, Muyuk arrogantly replied, asking why Yujigong carried a hammer if he lacked the guts to swing it. He was not afraid of such pathetic, low-down tactics. He warned Yujigong once more to have the bank books ready for tomorrow. And with a gaze of pure ice, he delivered a final, chilling threat. If Yujigang ever tried that again, he wouldn't live long enough to regret it. Hearing this, Uging felt a true shiver of fear run down his spine. Later, Director H was driving. Kim Muyuk in the seat next to him, curious about the earlier chaos. The director asked what went down. Calmly, Muyuk replied it was nothing. Just that Yujigang tried to smash his head in with a hammer. Shocked, Director Ha slammed on the brakes mid-road. Demanding to know if that psycho really tried to hit him with a hammer, Muyuk just laughed, reminding Director Ha they were in traffic and should probably focus on getting home. Later, after arriving home, Director Ha went directly to Chi and Tazin to report on the whole situation. Chi and Tazin asked how the meeting with Yu Jigang went. Director Ha reported that Uging refused to hand over any books. Instead, he demanded that Chi and Tazin show up in person to get them. Director Ha added that Yu Jigang actually tried to brain the young master with a hammer. Shocked, Shi and Tazin instantly demanded to know if Muyuk was okay. Director Ha confirmed the young master was unharmed. They then pressed him about Yuji Gang's insane stunt. Director Ha confessed he was clueless, since Yuji Gang had never pulled a stunt like this. After a moment, Shi and Tazin ordered Director Ha to deal with this himself. He said to handle it as he saw fit and make sure no more trouble arose. Director Ha acknowledged the command with a grim nod. Cut to Yuji Gang, chilling in his car, chatting on the phone with some crony. He bragged he only faked the hammer attack on Muyuk to scare the kid. After all, he figured Muyuk was just some brat, not the big shot he was cracked up to be. He smirked, thinking the chairman's losing his touch, but as his ride cruised down the road, a truck suddenly boxed him in. The next thing he knew, Yuji Gang was hogtied to a chair, his hands, feet, and mouth completely sealed. Director Ha strolled up, hammer in hand. He asked if they could have a little chat. Just the two of them. Calling him calmly, President Yu. Director Ha ripped the gag from Yuji Gang's mouth. Furious, Yuji Gang exploded, screaming about what they were doing and who the hell they thought they were. Unfazed, Director Ha reminded him he tried to smash the young master with a hammer. As he spoke, he swung the hammer right at Yuji Gang's face, but stopped it just inches from his skull. Director Ha pressed on, demanding to know why he'd pull a stunt like that. His gaze was sharp as a blade as he waited for a reply. Panicking, Yuji Gang yelled, his voice shaking as he claimed it was just a test for the young master. He insisted he only wanted to see if the kid had what it takes to fill the chairman's shoes. He swore on his life he never meant to actually hit him. Desperate, Yuji Gang begged, saying he had no reason to ever hurt the chairman's own grandson. He kept screaming his innocence, pleading for them to believe him, and offered up all the bank books, just begging them to make it stop. Just then, two more goons showed up on the scene. Director Ha instantly grilled Yuji Gang on who ordered him to pull this stunt. Flustered, Yuji Gang denied getting any orders, swearing again it was just a test for the young master and that he was telling the truth. Director Ha wasn't buying it, and warned Yuji Gang his time for lies was up. He ordered his two guys to plant him at the table and hold his hands down tight. Then he asked him one more time, demanding to know who ordered the hit on the young master. Yuji Gang yelled back defiantly, insisting nobody told him to do it. In response, Director Ha brought the hammer down hard on one of Yuji Gang's fingers, making him howl in pain. Director Ha asked his question again, but Yuji Gang stubbornly repeated that nobody gave him the order. Without even hesitating, Director Ha smashed another one of his fingers with the hammer. Again and again. Yuji Gang denied it, and Director Ha showed zero mercy, crushing his fingers one by one. As the brutal questioning dragged on, Yuji Gang's hand was painted red with blood, staining the table. Director A gave him a final warning. He threatened that if the lies continued, his right hand's fingers would meet the very same fate. He demanded to know who was pulling the strings, but Yuji Gang, the fool, insisted he was the sole mastermind. The director, ice in his veins, ordered his men to grab Yu Jiang's right hand. Terrified, Yu Jiang finally cracked, trembling like a leaf. He confessed that it was President Shin Suin who had masterminded the entire operation. Flashback to 1 week earlier, in a lavish estate, Shin Suin and Shin Suven had summoned all the presidents of Myeongdong to their mansion. President Nokisen, ever impatient, was the first to finally break the suffocating silence, demanding to know the reason for this gathering. Shin Suman then addressed them. He noted how rare it was for all four big shots to meet. He then mentioned the new kid lurking in their father's house, the very same upstart everyone was gossiping about. President Shin agreed, recognizing the kid as the chairman's grandson, the son of the late Miss Misuk. Shin Suven confirmed, adding that as fate would have it, the boy had started learning their father's business directly under Director Ha. He mentioned how strange it was that this kid just appeared out of nowhere, so boldly. He swore he'd learn the trade by clinging to the chairman like a stubborn leech. To Shin Suman, this whole situation felt ridiculous. He then voiced a concern, wondering if this mess might start some nasty rumors. His words grabbed President Kim Ho-sik's attention, who asked what kind of rumors he meant. Shin Suan spelled it out. The four of them were like family, the very pillars holding up all of Myeongdong, and were meant to inherit the chairman's legacy. But now, the whispers of another heir were lurking in the shadows. He confessed they didn't know how long their father would be around, so it was only right to pay attention to these events. He warned they couldn't let some street rat waltz in and start poisoning the chairman's mind with his nonsense. Hearing this, President Shin cautioned Shin Suman to watch his tongue, reminding him the chairman was still quite healthy. Shin Suman quickly backpedaled, admitting he may have misspoken in front of them all. He saw their fierce loyalty. True dogs for the chairman. But he urged President Shin to think this through very carefully. For the chairman's own sake, isn't it better to remove anyone who might interfere with his grand decisions? President Kim Ho-sik, however, noted that since the kid was the chairman's own grandson, this was a family affair. They had no right to meddle in this. Shin Suman shot back firmly, insisting this was not just some family squabble. He dismissed the idea he feared the young man, explaining his real worry was the chairman's potential to make a terrible choice. With a new president in charge and all future policies up in the air, he stressed that every single move held immense weight for their businesses. That alone made it crucial to be cautious. Shin Suman then told everyone Director Ha would be visiting them with the young man. Hearing this, Kim Ho-sik reacted with shock, asking if they were seriously going to pay them a visit. Shin Suman confirmed it, saying this was no impossible task. He was asking. He just wanted them to test the kid, to see what kind of man he was. Without a second thought, Yuagang agreed, saying he'd personally see if the kid was useful at all. The boy's just a 20-year-old brat, and he doubted the punk knew a thing about their business. He vowed to make damn sure that the boy learned a painful lesson. Suman smirked at Yujang's sharp wit, liking his zeal. Then, he addressed the other presidents as well, urging them all to consider this carefully. He reminded them their father's reign wouldn't last forever, and just like that, Shin Suman left his dear nephew to them, entrusting them with this little test. The next day begins as Director Ha spills everything to Chairman Tazin. He tells him it was Shin Suman's scheme from the very beginning. Suman had ordered them to test Muyuk, and it was Yujigang himself who was most eager to agree to it. Hearing this, Shin Tazin demands to know from Director Ha what they did to Yujigang. Director Ha replies, they got him to the hospital for surgery, but grimly adds, Yujigang will never use his left hand again. With a heavy heart, Shin Tazin notes that after all, Yujigang had served him for 30 long years. He orders Director Ha to give Yujigang enough cash to live well and let him retire without any trouble. Director Ha then voices another concern, asking about the two Chin brothers and if a warning would be enough. Shin Tazin places a hand on his forehead and declares that he will personally handle those two. Meanwhile, the scene cuts to Chin Suhan, telling Suman that Director Ha brutally smashed Yujigang's hands with a hammer. Suman is completely stunned to hear this. Full of worry, Chin Suhan asks his older brother what to do, terrified that their father has already found out everything. Just then, Suman gets a call, and he snaps at the person on the other end, not to disturb him right now. But on the other end, a voice apologizes, revealing it's Chairman Shin Tazin himself, requesting just a moment of his time. Hearing his father's voice, Suman freezes in pure panic. Hurriedly, he asks his father if he needs something. Shin Tazin gets straight to the point, asking if Suhan and Suman are together at that moment. Nervously, Suman confirms, asking if there's a job for them. Wasting no time, Shin Tazin demands why they told the four Myeongdong bosses to test Muyuk. Startled and desperate, Suman immediately denies the whole thing, claiming he only asked them to take good care of their little nephew. Shin Tazin explodes, calling Suman a damn fool. He berates him fiercely, asking if he's matured at all at his age. He continues to lash out, accusing Suman of being threatened by a kid who just turned 20. Seeing such a foolish move, Tazin confesses he's seriously reconsidering making Muyuk his heir. Suman stammers, trying to explain, but Shin Tazin cuts him off cold. He declares that he already knows the whole truth and warns him not to lie anymore. Tazin issues a final threat. If he ever hears of Suman messing with Muyuk again, he'll toss him from the family without a single penny. Desperate, Suman begged his father to believe him, swearing he'd done nothing wrong. But Tasa just cut the line cold. Seething with rage, Suman stormed back to his brother, demanding to know what their father said. But without a word, Suman hurls his phone in a fit of rage, cursing that bastard Moody for poisoning their father's mind against him. Fists clenched, Suman vowed he'd make that punk Moody pay for this. Meanwhile, in the next scene, Tazin turned to director Ha. Getting straight to the point about some rumors he'd heard. He asked if the rumors were true that President-elect Kim Manson planned to shake up the Howe Council. The director confirmed it, explaining the president-elect would reform the military the moment he's in office. Apparently, every single current member of the Howe Council was getting the boot. Due to this threat, the council members began meeting far more often. Tazin, deep in thought, remarked on the president-elect's gutsy play. He noted that if the president-elect was targeting the Howe Council before his term, he was absolutely determined to execute his plans. Director Ha went on to explain, mentioning the president-elect lost a lot under the military's rule. And even though he once worked with them to topple the old government, that shaky alliance wasn't going to hold for much longer. Shunzan then voiced his own concerns, asking if the military would just stand by and let this happen. After all, military power still ran deep in this country. Director Ha acknowledged his point, admitting that some were already whispering about the possibility of a coup. Tazin mulled over the idea of a coup, then turned to get Muyuk's take on it. He asked what Muyuk thought about this potential powder keg. Without a moment's pause, Muyuk declared, with total confidence the military wouldn't dare to resist. He noted the president-elect already swapped the chief of staff and defense security commander, the two pillars of the military. And get this, it only took him 4 hours to pull it off after calling the defense secretary. Muyuk added that, even if he did gut the Howe Council, the rest of the military, with their old-school way of thinking, wouldn't dare oppose him. More importantly, he said, the people would never stand for the military, trying to seize power with a coup. A bit surprised, and maybe a little amused, Tazin noted Muyuk's keen interest in politics. Muyuk replied that it's just part of the job. Since politics plays a huge role in their line of work, he stressed that he keeps up with every single piece of news. Then, with a confident smirk, he added that he already knows every major event for the next 30 years. Tazin then changed the subject, asking about any other moves besides the Howe Council. He needed to know what else the president-elect had up his sleeve. Director Ha admitted that no one really knew what the president-elect was truly after. Even their spies among the chief secretaries were in the dark about the VIP's endgame. However, a report from the last chief conference said that the topic of a full-blown war on corruption came up. Tazan's interest was piqued by this so-called war on corruption. The director explained the push was to publicly expose the assets of all high-ranking officials. Of course, there was some serious pushback. He was betting that, knowing the president-elect's nature, he'd ram it through anyway. Shinzan confessed he'd anticipated a move this big, but it was still a huge shock to happen so fast. He then immediately questioned the real name financial system. The director shot back that the real name financial system hadn't even been whispered about. Even the secretaries of economic affairs and the huge corporations couldn't dig up a single piece of info on it. Chunasen asked the director for his thoughts on this situation. The director speculated that given the massive backlash and side effects, implementing the real name financial system would happen next year at the earliest. But if it got pushed back anymore, he figured it might not even happen until the end of the president's term. From kicking out the Howe Council to exposing the assets of all the top dogs, the president-elect will have already pulled off major reforms, and the real name system would be an even bigger headache for him. Shinta-san then turned back to Muyuk, curious to hear what he thought about it all. Muyuk declared with total confidence, the real name financial system will happen this year, no matter what. Shocked, Shinta-san challenged that bold claim, demanding Muyuk explain his reasoning. Muyuk explained that even though they'd been talking about this system since the 70s, it had always been shut down by political opposition. But this time, with the president-elect's decisive nature, Muyuk was sure he'd finalize plans with a trusted few, and then just drop the policy like a bombshell. Shinta-san just laughed at Muyuk's theory, pointing out that while the kid was definitely smart, he had zero clue how politicians really think. He said that even if the president-elect wasn't a soldier, politicians are always chained to their political funds. If he actually implemented the real name financial system, all his secret slush funds would be laid bare. And there's no way to hide that evidence so quickly. Muyuk conceded that he had a point, but stressed they still needed to prepare for the consequences of funds in borrowed name and anonymous accounts. Shinta-san reassured him, saying not to sweat it. He'd already split the funds and given them to people he could trust. But Muyuk, dead serious, warned his grandfather that human greed is bottomless. Even if they had the seals and the bank books now, once that real name financial system hits, if someone else is handling all that cash, it's going to be a total disaster. Without direct control of those accounts, they'd be in for a world of hurt. Privately, Muyuk knew the cold, hard truth. Because of the real name financial system's implementation, his grandfather was about to take a massive hit. All that cash in borrowed name and anonymous accounts would basically just vanish. Nearly a fourth of his entire fortune. And Muyuk knew the real name system was dropping this month. In August, only 6 months left. If his grandfather failed to secure the funds in those accounts before then, he'd lose hundreds of billions, maybe trillions of won. Shin, still weighing his options, asked Muyuk if his belief the real name financial system would be launched in the year was just another one of his hunches. Muyuk confirmed it, saying it was indeed his intuition. While it might be delayed from the start of the president's term, he was certain it would not go beyond the summer. Tazin then pressed on for more information, asking how Muyuk found the bank books he gave the Mayand bosses. He pointed out he'd never revealed their existence to anyone, so how did Muyuk know about them, internally? Muyuk was just waiting for this very question. With a composed expression, Muyuk replied that Tazin himself had instructed him to take over those banks. Judging by the looks on their faces, it was clear they found it strange. In a private space, when directly questioned, they seemed to be hiding something, and finally admitted it themselves. Tazin questioned if this was just Kim Muyuk's intuition. Muyuk confirmed it was. Tazin then called out to Muyuk, who responded without a second's delay. Tazin declared he would entrust Muyuk with the 400 billion won from the secret accounts of the Mayon bosses. If the real name financial system is implemented this year, the money will vanish. Muyuk might be the only one to protect it, so Tazin trusted him with it. He told Muyuk to use the money as he saw fit, but warned that if he wasted it, there would be no more money from him. He made sure Muyuk understood. Muyuk assured his grandfather that he wouldn't fail. Inside, Muyuk smirked to himself, thinking he had expected this exact outcome, but he hadn't guessed he'd be entrusted with the whole sum. The 400 billion won from the Mayong bosses was now his. With this, he could push his plan against the Cheon brothers much faster. Building trust with his grandfather over time had been worth it. Tazin then instructed Director Hum Yong-hun to sort out the accounts, uniting them all under borrowed names, anonymous, and false identities. He ordered it to be completed by this July. Director Ha acknowledged the command, responding with determination. Tazin reflected on the upcoming real name financial system, expected by August. If it really happens, Muyuk would prove to be a kid blessed with intuition and heavenly luck. On February 25, 1993, the 14th president, Kim Mansum's inauguration took place. For the first time, a civilian, not a military leader, rose to power, marking the beginning of the so-called civilian government. Immediately upon taking office, President Kim Mansum launched his new reform policies. He dissolved the Echo Council and enforced the disclosure of public officials' assets. Amidst these reforms, he was also secretly preparing to launch the financial real name system. For his efforts, Muyuk received an award. A moment to be remembered. The scene shifts to Mangu, who complains that it's boring as hell. He questions Muyuk about what he plans to do now, reminding him that classes start tomorrow. Muyuk replies that he is thinking of checking out the library. Irritated, Mangu calls him a geek, wondering if he's really going to study on the very first day. Miduk says, since they're college guys now, they gotta hit the library. But then, Mamu's eyes narrowed on something strange. He stared at Muyuk, totally bewildered, realizing his accent was straight-up Seoul style, not from their hometown. Muyuk caught his stare and asked, "What's up, why are you looking at me like that?" Mangu then clapped a hand on his shoulder. Mangu demanded, "How'd your Seoul accent get so slick already? You barely came to Seoul before," he accused. "Trying to woo a city girl already. You little punk," he grinned mischievously. He got all hyped up, saying they should hit up Jongdong to celebrate getting in. He insisted they had to grab some drinks for the occasion. Muyuk reminded him flatly, "I already said I wouldn't go drinking with you. I know I messed up last time," he begged. "I swear it won't happen again. Just this once," Mangu pleaded. Getting desperate, Mangu snapped, asking if studying was all Muyuk considered. And if he was even prepping for the bar exam, he quickly promised he'd prepare, vowing to ace the bar exam's first round in 2 years. But for now, he just wanted to have some fun today. Hyped, Mangu started chanting Muyuk's name over and over, yelling about them heading out to Apgu Jongdong. Hearing Mangu's endless begging, Muyuk finally caved, but insisted they just grab a few drinks and then head back. Mangu was ecstatic. Soon, Muyuk and Mangu arrived at a Wild Rock Cafe, a place that had the pulsing energy of a nightclub. Mangu's eyes went wide the second they walked in. The place was packed with gorgeous girls, and he was in heaven. He couldn't stop his weird gawking, which earned him some strange looks from the girls, bursting with pure energy. Mangu yelled to Muyuk, totally blown away by the vibe. "This is a rock cafe," he shouted. "We got nothing like this back in Busan." It wasn't like a nightclub, there were no table reservations. Everyone just danced and had a great time wherever. Seeing Mangu so hyped, Muyuk cracked a smile. Just then, two girls came up to them. One of them was a girl named Lee Yuri. She recognized Muyuk immediately, pointing him out as the one and only Kim Muyuk, Korea University's top student. She admitted she thought he was just a model student who only ever studied, and was shocked to see him at a place like this. She explained that they were his seniors from Korea University. Both of them, second-year students. She said she'd heard about his perfect academic exam score, and even went to the entrance ceremony just to catch a glimpse of him, complimenting him. She said he was even better looking in person. Wondering how the country's top law student could have such a handsome face, with a playful smile. She asked if they could join their table. Muyuk kept it cool, saying he didn't mind. He called her Sunbae, and mentioned he was only planning on staying for one quick drink. Meanwhile, Mangu spotted the two girls and ditched his dancing in a flash. He scrambled over to Muyuk and the seniors, eagerly butting in that it was more than fine, and they should all party hard tonight. So the four of them sat down and started to chat. The girl in the blue jacket turned to Mangu, asking if he was Lee Mangu and if they'd been friends for a long time. Mangu puffed his chest out, confirming they'd been best buds since they were kids. The girl in blue got curious, asking with a smile, "You guys aren't from Seoul, are you?" Mangu said they were from Busan, and asked if she'd been. He added that Gwangali was the hottest spot to be these days. She knew the name, asking if he meant Gwangali Beach. His accent was adorable, so she couldn't help but tease him a bit. Blushing, Mangu chuckled, asking if his accent was really that cute. Meanwhile, Luri turned to Muyuk, wondering why he was so silent. It made sense. Though, a guy that handsome would of course be stoic, and just his presence alone was enough to make people swoon. Just then, a voice called out to Luri from behind. That voice sounded disturbingly familiar to Muyuk. When he turned, he realized it was his older cousin. Of all people, Jin. Luri asked Jin if he knew them. Inside, Muyuk groaned, wondering why that walking disaster had to show up here. He decided it was best to just get out of there. Muyuk quickly told Luri they were about to leave. He yelled for Mangu, telling him to get ready to bounce. Surprised, Mangu whined, asking to stay and drink with the Nunas. Muyuk insisted, telling him one glass of beer, and then they were leaving for good. He told Jin they didn't care if he had his fun, but warned him not to go overboard or start his usual drama again. With that, Muyuk turned to leave. Luri tried to stop him, calling out and asking where he was headed, but before she could move, Jin grabbed her hand. He questioned why she was even with trash like them, calling them low class and sneering that for someone so high and mighty. She sure kept some pathetic company. Luri, absolutely livid, snapped at Jin, demanding to know what the hell he was even talking about. She questioned why he cared who she was with, and then demanded that he let her go right now. Her anger grew as she asked if he'd gone totally insane. Watching this, Muyuk thought that every time he tried to drink at a club, he always got sucked into some useless garbage. Stepping forward, Muyuk put a hand on Jin's shoulder and coolly said it was enough, telling him to let go of her hand. Jin, irritated, smacked Muyuk's hand off his shoulder and snarled back, questioning who the hell he thought he was to touch him, calling him a punk. Muyuk thought to himself that Jin had been this way since they were kids. Wherever he went, he just made trouble. No wonder their grandfather was always so stressed out. Keeping his voice low, Muyuk told Jin he never wanted anyone to know they were related because it was just that embarrassing. He reminded him that there were too many people here tonight, so it'd be smart not to cause a scene, especially since Grandpa always had to clean up Jin's messes. Fuming, Jin told Muyuk to watch his mouth and that he'd end him tonight, calling over 3 of his goons. Jin smirked as the one in the middle asked what was going on. The thug mentioned they were having a good time, and then pointed a thumb at Muyuk, asking who the guy in the red shirt was, and if he was the one giving Jin a hard time. Seeing them, Muyuk thought, as expected, Jin always needed losers like this to back him up. What a classic move. Yin sneered, telling his thugs Muyuk was just a roach who crawled in. The thug replied that they should just squash him then, told Jin Yuan not to sweat it, he'd handle the cleanup. Muyuk then told Mangu to get the 2 girls out of there. Pronto. Anxious, Mangu asked Muyuk if this was really okay. Muyuk, full of swagger, just told him to remember who he was, but Mangu shot back that he wasn't worried for Muyuk. He was worried about those poor thugs, and if they were going to be okay. As the 3 goons rushed Muyuk at once, he casually sidestepped their sorry attacks. In just moments, he dropped them all, leaving them in a heap on the floor. Turning to Jun, Muyuk advised him not to hang with such lowlifes, Did June really think their grandfather was clueless? He offered to enlighten him. Muyuk warned him that if June kept acting like this, he'd forget June was his older cousin. He told June to clean up his own mess and ensure no one came crying to him about this, because if they did, they'd have to meet again. Hearing all this, June's face just totally crumbled, leaving him utterly speechless. It was Muyuk's first day of college. In the middle of class, the professor asked if any student knew what Article 1, Section 1 of the nation's constitution stated. A student confidently replied that the Republic of Korea is a democratic republic. The prof praised him, then asked about Article 1, Section 2. This time, the room went silent. The prof explained that sovereignty in the Republic of Korea lies with the people, and all state power comes from them. He reminded the class that whether they became prosecutors, lawyers, or judges after they graduate and pass the bar, they must always hold Article 1, Section 1 and Section 2 close to their hearts. Any legal pro who forgets that isn't a true pro at all. When class ended, Manhwa hit Muyuk up, reminding him about their plans with Hamsung that night. Hamsung confirmed, saying that since Kyung's been so swamped with his training, it's been tough to get together. Then, a gorgeous girl called out to Muyuk from behind, asking if he was Muyuk. Spotting the stunning girl, Mangu got all hyped up, asking Muyuk who she was and if he knew her. The girl said her name was Xianju and asked if Muyuk knew who she was. Muyuk thought, even though this is our first meeting in this life, that familiar look in her eyes, there's no mistaking it. She was Xianju, the granddaughter of the Samsung Group's chairman. He remembered all too clearly the way she'd looked down on him in his past life, like he was a bug while he was cleaning up the Chin family's messes. Xianju then asked if he had a moment, saying there was something she needed to discuss. They sat in her car as she apologized for the late intro, explaining it had been ages since she'd visited her grandfather's house. Now, she figured he already knew who she was. She then mentioned hearing about his perfect score on the college entrance exam, calling it super impressive and saying he was a genius. She added she's a student here too, in the business administration department. Muyuk, his tone icy, asked if that was all she had to say, since he had to go meet his friends. Ju, a bit playfully, asked why he was being so cold. She reminded him she was his cousin, and this was their first time meeting. Muyuk grumbled his uncles were giving him some special education lately, and since she's their kid, he had to be wary. Yu just smirked, saying she'd heard the rumors. She'd also heard how Muyuk crushed all the Mayong bosses. That's why she was here to see him. Then she dropped a bombshell. Let's form an alliance. Surprised, Muyuk questioned this alliance. Ju said there was no need to be enemies. She didn't care for Grandpa's loan shark business, or if Muyuk learned the trade under him. Her only goal was Samsung Group. Muyuk thought. So that's her real game. The Samsung Group. Ju laid her cards out. Her target was Samsung. If Muyuk helped her out, she'd help him become Grandpa's successor. Before Muyuk showed up, Chini was the chosen one. But the game had changed. Now the succession battle was between Muyuk and her dear brother. If they teamed up, and she fed him intel, wouldn't his chances of winning skyrocket? She warned him not to think that thug, Chin Wan, was a pushover, or he was just full of himself. However, she also warned him not to underestimate her brother. After all, he's still the Chin family's eldest grandson. Jisoo said no matter how much Grandpa liked Muyuk, he's an outsider, while Hwan's the firstborn son. If Hwan gets Samsung's backing, all bets are off. She told Muyuk to watch his back or he'd get crushed. Muyuk asked what was in it for her. After all, an alliance is all about give and take. Ju said if Muyuk inherited their grandfather's throne, she wants his support, with Grandpa's Samsung shares. Muyuk admitted he was a little lost. If her brother became the successor, wouldn't he help her anyway? He is her blood. After all, he should naturally help her out. Ju just laughed at that. She scoffed. If Chian took over Grandpa's biz, he'd try to swallow Samsung whole. His greed is insane, and he wouldn't even hesitate. Muyuk questioned her nerve. Could she really take the Summon group with just his support? From what he heard, the group had a set succession plan. Ju said she wasn't trying to take all of Samsung. She's not that crazy, but wants half since her mom, Suyong, was Samsung's eldest daughter. Muyuk thought back quietly. In his past life, Shinju jumped into the succession war after the Samsung chairman had a heart attack. After a brutal fight, she'd snagged a third of Samsung, but the group was left in ruins. The Chien Jisoo he knew was not a woman to be messed with. She'd backstab anyone to get what she wanted. And now this viper was offering him a deal. Muyuk pressed her more. From the looks of it, aren't you the only one losing in this deal? Ju asked what he meant. Muyuk said she was on the losing end. All she was getting was his promise. If he failed to become Grandpa's successor, she'd get squat. And even if he did succeed, yeah, he could totally backstab her. Ju conceded the point. She was in a seriously bad spot. But the thought of Chi and Juan snatching up Grandpa's entire fortune was infuriating. That brat has had everything handed to him since he was just a kid, instead of watching him get it all. She'd rather see a total stranger claim the prize. Muyuk told her he'd give it some thought. Ju pressed him for a quick answer. If he said no, she'd just have to find another partner. She made sure he got the message loud and clear. Then, Ju sped off in her car. Soon after, Mangu whined to Muyuk that it was totally unfair. How come Muyuk was the only one hanging out with such a pretty lady? Muyuk shot back that she was just his cousin. Hearing this, Mangu's eyes lit up, practically leaping on him. Mangu yelled that if she's his cousin, then Muyuk was basically his brother-in-law. How could he not recognize his own family? Meanwhile, Muyuk was lost in thought. In his past life, Chunjisu used to treat him worse than dirt. But now she's proposing a team-up with ridiculously good terms for him. He wondered if this was a golden opportunity or just another well-disguised and deadly trap. Muyuk and his grandfather sat in a calm, familiar quiet. His grandfather asked about his first day of classes. Wondering if he'd had a good time, Muyuk said it went well, adding that Ju Nuna had stopped by to see him. At that, his grandfather noted that, since he had no siblings, he should try to stay on good terms with his cousins. Muyuk gave a small smile, promising that he would. He told him they'd agreed to keep in touch and meet up often. But inside his head, Muyuk plotted their master plan. Jisoo would seize Samsung, and he'd claim all of his grandfather's massive assets. His grandfather, getting curious, asked why Muyuk needed to see him the second he got home. Muyuk mentioned the secret account with 400 billion won he was given. He declared his plan to move the entire stash offshore. Startled, his grandfather demanded to know the reason for such a sudden move. Muyuk calmly replied that, since the money wasn't needed right now, he wanted to invest it all abroad. The old man mulled it over, asking if Muyuk was sure about this. Reminding him of the warning he gave when he first handed over the account, Muyuk nodded. Recalling the warning, it might be the last cash he ever got from his grandfather. His grandfather argued for keeping the money local for stability, asking why Muyuk was so dead set on moving it overseas. Muyuk thought to himself about the headache of moving funds out of the country right now, and how it'd be a nightmare once the real-name financial system fully kicks in. But with his grandfather's power, this was the absolute perfect time to strike. He laid out his logic, explaining that the current government's policies, like that financial system, would just keep making things harder for his grandfather's business. Even if his grandfather wasn't the direct target of the crackdown, the shadow economy he ran was bound to take a massive hit. So, they had to shift the funds overseas. And fast. He added that with some help from the overseas branches of the conglomerates his grandfather had lent money to, sending 400 billion won abroad should be a piece of cake. His grandpa agreed moving the funds wasn't hard. But he still questioned the extreme urgency. He questioned moving money over policies not yet law, calling it rash. But Muyuk, determined, demanded his grandfather's trust, since the funds were his to manage. In his head, though, he admitted the request was audacious, but his direct approach was the best way forward. After all, he couldn't just say he knew the future to win him over. His grandpa just chuckled at Muyuk's nerve. He noted his own sons could barely speak to him. Yet Muyuk spoke without fear. Thanks to him, he'd been laughing more lately. At last, he gave in, asking if just wiring the money would be enough for him. Muyuk requested the 400 billion won moved to a US account. And for 7 years, until 2000, his grandpa was not to ask. Stunned, his grandfather echoed the insane conditions, asking if Muyuk wanted this huge sum invested with no questions for 7 years. Muyuk confirmed it. He boldly promised there was zero risk of losing the money. His grandfather finally caved, ordering Director Ha to handle the swift, silent transfer to the US. But he warned Muyuk lose this, and there are no second chances. Muyuk knew the stakes and accepted the terms. Internally, he thought, Muyuk knew this cash was essential for his future clash with Choi Soo-min and Choi Soo-hyun. If it stayed in the country, they would absolutely try to meddle. But handling 400 billion won solo would be a huge pain. He realized he needed a proxy to manage the funds for him. And he had the perfect guy in mind, the legendary Super Ant, a merciless hunter of foreign investment firms. In the late 90s, this man would rock the Korean stock market, but right now, he was just a struggling lone investor, plagued by constant failure and bad luck. In less than a decade, he'd be hailed as the god of stocks. Han Kim-young. In the next scene, Muyuk arrived at the Motel Monsoon. He recalled Director Ha's warning that finding Han Kim-young would be tough, given his mountain of debt and loans. Yet, he'd managed to pin down his location. Muyuk had specifically asked Director Ha for Han Kim-young's address, keeping the reason for his request to himself. Stepping inside the motel, he walked to the receptionist and asked if a man named Mr. Han was there. Han Kim-young was a guest. The woman, on guard, immediately asked if he was some kind of cop, pointing out that in a dump like this, no one bothered with proper guest logs. She claimed not to know any names. Muyuk rephrased, asking about a guy in his late 20s who was a long-term guest. The woman paused for a moment, looking unsure, so, without a word, Muyuk slid a fat stack of cash her way. The moment she saw the money, her whole attitude shifted. She gave a sly smile, claiming she could now see the dragon eyes of the great king. And just like that, she suddenly remembered a young man who fit that description. She checked her book and pointed him to the room. Just then, Han Kim-young strolled right past them. The lady instantly fingered him. Smelling trouble, Han Kim-young shot up the stairs in a mad dash. Muyuk gave chase, yelling for him to just hold on a sec, insisting he just wanted a word. Cornered, Han-young looked like he'd leap off the roof. Muyuk, alarmed, begged him to stop, promising he wasn't there for the debt. He pleaded for a chat. Hearing that, Kyung paused, asking if Muyuk wasn't some loan shark. Muyuk, catching his breath, smirked. Well, technically, I am one. Tazin Capital, a place with a seriously shady rep, was their next stop, with Han Kim-young leading the way. Staring at the building, Muyuk asked, "So, this is the joint?" Kim Jong flinched, admitting he was scared of the guys inside. But Muyuk didn't even blink, telling him they were just there to pay up, so no need to sweat it. Without another word, they both walked in. Inside, two thugs were slurping down ramen. Spotting Han Kim-young, one of them sneered loudly, jeering that he'd walked right into his own grave. He lunged to attack Kim-young, but Muyuk snatched his arm and cranked it back, stating firmly they came to pay the debt. So, to skip the drama and call their boss, the racket brought their boss out, who snarled about the noise. Then, his gaze locked onto Han Kim-young, and with a nasty grin, he taunted, well, we've missed you so much." Then he asked where the cash was. Muyuk stepped up, declaring he'd handle Kim-young's debt, and demanded to know the total amount. The boss, intrigued, started his calculations. He said 6 months back, Kim-young borrowed 500 as the principal, after taking 30% interest up front and adding 22% compounded monthly, plus a 12% late fee. The total ballooned. Annoyed by the long-winded math, Muyuk cut him off, demanding the bottom line without all the fluff. The amused boss complimented Muyuk on being so sharp, saying after all's said and done, they'd settle for a clean 50 million won. Ken Jang, stunned, yelled that, just days ago, it was only 25 million. He couldn't get how a 500 loan grew tenfold in half a year. The boss smirked, saying it's all in the contract, including late fees, and 17 million won spent on tracking Kim-young, and another 7 million won for emotional damages and insomnia, totaling 50 million won. Muyuk mulled over the insane math, thinking, so this is a world where 5 million can just become 50 million. Ken Jung sputtered in disbelief, calling it a total scam. Muyuk thought again about these ruthless loan sharks, who bleed desperate people completely dry. Ken Jung's fraud claim enraged the boss, who yelled at him for being cocky while dodging his debt. He threatened to peel the flesh from his bones and pickle it. Despite all the threats, Muyuk just calmly confirmed the total, asking if 50 million would clear the debt. The boss eagerly agreed, saying if he brought 50 million won in cash, he'd happily shred the contract. Muyuk then asked to use their phone. The boss let him, saying to use it all he wants. Muya hit up Director Ha, telling him to prep 50 million won and get it to their spot. Pronto. He hung up and told the boss they just had to chill for 15 minutes. The cash was on its way. The boss just laughed, amused by Muyuk's swagger. Why go this far for someone else's huge debt? So, he pried. You guys family? Or just pals? Muyuk clarified, they just met today. He simply had business with Kem and chose to pay for him. The boss seemed impressed. The boss praised his spirit, even offering him a job. Muyuk turned it down, saying he was just a student. The boss cracked up, surprised. Hey, if you can't find work after school, call me. I've got a high-paying gig for you. Silently, Muyuk thought to himself, I don't recognize this loan shark. Probably the kind that vanishes when the system gets serious. Out loud, he shot the offer down flat, sarcastically asking how much a small fry operation like theirs could possibly rake in. That lit a fire under the two goons, calling him an arrogant brat. Muyuk clapped back, saying even if they ran shady loans, they should know their place. He blasted them for threatening people and stealing hard-earned cash with their thuggery. The boss just smirked, admitting he loved it. Then he sneered, questioning Muyuk's upbringing, asking if no one taught him respect. Smirking, Muyuk mocked the irony of a scummy loan shark talking about manners, calling it a total joke. Furious, the boss roared for his men to grab Muyuk, yelling that before the money, he'd teach him some respect. Hearing this unfold, Hen Kyong was totally terrified. Muyuk just glanced at his watch, noting Director Ha was due any second. And just then, Director Ha appeared, carrying the 50 million won, and asked if there was a problem. Seeing him, the two goons demanded who he was, calling him some punk and asking how he dared to just waltz in here. Are you with this kid? They asked. But Director Ha stayed silent, which just pissed them off more. One of them grabbed Director Ha, cursing him out and demanding an answer. Why are you here? You got a death wish or something? Seeing this, their boss jumped in, yelling for them to stop. He then bowed respectfully to Director Ha with a greeting. Director Ha asked if the boss knew who he was. The boss said in the Myeongdong biz. Everyone knows Director Ha. He knew Director Ha worked for Chairman Shin Tae-san, owner of Myeongdong, and wondered what brought him to a dump like this. Director Ha then turned to Muyuk, and with great respect, handed him the 50 million won, addressing him as Young Master. Hearing Young Master, a shocked goon asked if this kid was really Shin Tae-san's grandson, son of Ms. Misu. The realization left them absolutely stunned. Director Ha then asked what was going on. Muyuk replied that it was nothing major, just settling a debt for an acquaintance. But, he added, the boss here seemed more keen on teaching a lesson in manners than taking the cash. Overcome with sheer terror, the boss dropped to his knees before Muyuk, groveling for a second chance, swearing it would never happen again. He forced his assistant to kowtow to Muyuk. Together, the three of them begged for their lives. Finally, Muya slapped the 50 million won bundle onto the table and told them they could have their